Oh, yeah. From a public relations perspective, that would have been disastrous. No crisis PR firm could have spun that to her advantage.
She needs us
No
as her
way.
PR team.
No, literally. That's like some scandal level, like, where's Olivia Pope shit?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah. Everyone, welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Oh man, while I don't think this set of chapters was quite as exciting as last week, we did finally get Rowan and Aelin together, and that was very exciting. So I don't know, maybe I should take that back. Maybe it was just exciting. We also get some interesting reveals, and some threads of fate are weaving together when Manon and Abraxos find Aelin and the crew. So
I think it was exciting, just in a different way, for different reasons.
True, yeah. Not like anxiety from everyone being in peril. Yeah. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 38 through 42 specifically, but there will definitely be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes Tab, TOG, Com, Hoff, and QOS. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. Our next Empire Storms episode will cover chapters 43 through 49. Second, if you need to fill the time between our Empire Storms episodes, then definitely check out our Onyx Storm coverage. Or if you want to revisit the past with a nostalgic book, then we have 2 Paging the Past book reviews covering the first 2 books in the Hunger Games series available as well. Our Paging the Past episodes will be monthly book reviews to revisit our favorite series from the past, including Harry Potter, Twilight, and more. So that is all for housekeeping, and let's get into the episode. We'll start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we'll dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter, and finally we will share our favorite moments. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Emotionally. Chapter 38. Aelin and Rowan meet with Rolf to debrief about what the hell just happened. Rolf was pretty pissed about the fact that Aelin, who was body snatched by Deanna, almost blew his town away. Aelin turned the tables and told Rolf from where she stood he had just allied himself with someone so powerful she could decimate cities if she wished, and he'd better remember it. Aelin prepared to leave the inn, but Rolf told her the story of how he got his magical map to demonstrate the cost of his power and asked Aelin if she truly knew what the cost might be of her great power. An upset Aelin took off towards a deserted beach with Rowan in tow. At the beach, Aelin was beside herself with anger and worry, but Rowan reassured her that no matter what, they were in this together. The conversation quickly turned into a deeper and more romantic direction, and finally culminated in the moment we've all been waiting for. Aelin told Rowan she loved him, and he told her he loved her back. To whatever end, the 2 made love on the beach and claimed each other.
Yay!
It only took like 3,000 pages. Chapter 39. Rowan and Aelin made their way back to the inn, and although Rowan had other plans for them, they instead went to Dorian, Aiden, and Lysander's room to discuss what happened during the battle in the bay. Aelin told them everything about what happened with Deanna, the 3rd wyrd-key, and how they had tricked Lorcan in hopes he would come back with the other 2 keys. But Aelin was tired of not having all the answers, and so she decided it was time to call Elena. Aelin quickly drew the wyrd-keys, and they waited, and it wasn't long before Elena appeared. As usual, Elena could not stay long, but she stayed just long enough to tell Aelin the importance of finding the lock to defeat Erewhon, and who Elena's mother had been, Mala Firebringer. But before Aelin could get more answers, Elena disappeared. Aelin decided that they would head for the stone marshes of Eyllwe the next morning to search for the lock. They departed and spent the next 3 days navigating out of the archipelago when they sensed something coming towards them. It wasn't long before Dorian realized it was a wyvern. But this wasn't just any wyvern. It was Abraxos carrying an unconscious Manon. Dorian screamed for them to stop, and Aelin ordered everyone to hold their fire. Abraxos circled the ship, and Manon Blackbeak slid off his back and hit the water. Chapter 40. Turns out Lorcan was a way better performer than he gave himself credit for. Although that may have had something to do with him being shirtless and all of his muscles, and the body oil definitely didn't hurt. Elide, on the other hand, may have been a talented oracle, but no one knew because they were all too busy ogling Lorcan. An annoyed and jealous Elide abandoned her tent to see what all the fuss was about, and she was not disappointed by what she saw. But Molly quickly cooled her jets and told her to get back to her tent. As the carnival came to an end, Lorcan appeared at Elide's tent, where they had a conversation that made Elide feel the urge to tell Lorcan everything about her past. But as she prepared to open her mouth to speak, the screaming started. Gods above! Lorcan cursed himself for being so preoccupied with thoughts of Elide and her sinful mouth, because had he not been, he probably would have sensed the attack coming. Lorcan quickly made his way to the heart of the camp, where he confronted the ilken. They questioned him about a girl they were searching for, a girl with a limp, a girl whose name was Elide Lorcan, and whose uncle was Lord of Parenth. But Lorcan didn't have time to dwell on Elide's lie before the ilken attacked. Chapter 41. Elide had squeezed herself into a hidden floor compartment of one of the carnival wagons and waited in silent fear. After what felt like hours, Elide decided her only option was to make a run for it. As she prepared to run, her cloak snagged on something inside the compartment. But that wasn't the only thing that stopped her in her tracks, because there was Lorcan, standing there, covered in black blood, with death in his eyes. Lorcan confronted Elide about lying to him, but our fearless Elide didn't back down a single inch. As a matter of fact, she gave Lorcan the business, and I'll be damned if that wasn't fun to read. As a sign of trust, Elide tells Lorcan her true backstory, and Lorcan returns the favor. They come to a mutual understanding and agree to stick together with the carnival troupe for a little while longer. But as Elide walked into the night, Lorcan wondered again what the hell he was doing. Chapter 42. Manon Blackbeak was not dead, at least not yet. When she finally awoke, she realized she was in a cabin on a ship. It wasn't until she heard Aelin Galithania speak to her that it all came crashing back to her. Aelin tells Manon that she was now their prisoner and that if she stepped one toe out of line, she was as good as dead. Manon slept for another 3 days before she was awake enough to have another conversation. But this time, it was with our princeling, Dorian. The two had a lengthy conversation that was equal parts flirtatious and sorrowful. Dorian told Manon how they found and rescued her, and Manon told Dorian a very abbreviated version of the events that led her to this predicament. The conversation with Dorian took everything out of Manon. It sapped her of all her strength and resolve because she realized one simple truth. She had nothing and no one save the 13, and she had no news of their fates. She knew not whether they lived or died, and so Manon Blackbeak sank back into a depressive sleep and dreamed. And that concludes the book report.
Oh, Manon. I'm really worried about the 13, I will admit.
I know. I thought they would have found her by now, honestly. You would think we'd switch to Astron's POV or something, but no. Don't feel good.
I don't feel good about it either. I'm very worried for them, so... Well, thank you for that excellent book report. And let's get into our analysis portion, starting with some overarching thoughts.
Okay, guys. Wow, I have a lot of overarching thoughts. So before we get into my thoughts and feelings about this set of chapters, we have to talk about the title for part 2, because this set of chapters took us through the end of part 1 and the beginning of part 2. If you'll recall, part 1 was titled The Firebringer, and part 2 is titled Fireheart. Back at the beginning of the book, I speculated that part 1 was titled Firebringer as a reference to Aelin's power, as well as a reference to the origins of her power, who we know is from Mala Firebringer. I also speculated that Aelin's use and control of her power would be super important as they prepared to fight Erewhon, and I feel that was pretty accurate so far. That was definitely thematically important in the recent Battle of Skull's Bay and everything, so that feels pretty on track to me. For part 2, Fireheart is what Aelin's mother used to call her, and Rowan also frequently calls Aelin his Fireheart. I feel like part 2 is titled Fireheart because it signifies the importance of Aelin and Rowan's relationship and how they have seemingly locked in the mating bond, and even more so, I feel like their bond will greatly impact pretty much everything as the story progresses. It already feels like that's the trend anyway. I mean, quite literally, his feelings for Aelin broke up Maeve's cadre. That feels pretty significant, and it just feels like that's going to continue. Their connection to each other is going to impact the outcomes of certain events in the story.
I really like your interpretation here because honestly, with all the speculation about Aelin being sacrificed or used by the gods, I am worried that perhaps Fireheart may also mean that Rowan loses his Fireheart and will have to fight for her or something by the end of this book here. Whether it's another god takeover or Erewhon or Maeve, something is going to happen to his Fireheart, and I don't feel good about that. It could also...
Take that back.
I know.
Take that back right now.
I feel like he's going to have to save her because he's the guiding force. He is the person that like brings her back to herself and brings her home, essentially, right? Now that they're like officially locked in with the mating bond, as you said. So, well, again, still not confirmed on this freaking mating bond, but like 99.99% sure that it is.
Oh, yeah.
I also thought it could potentially be like a literal manifestation of Aelin's fire heart, aka like her fiery soul. How hot will Aelin burn, or how deep within herself will she go to protect her loved ones or to get what she needs?
Oh, that's interesting. Sometimes I'm like, Aelin would literally burn out for the people she loves. And I don't mean like magically. I mean, she would literally go up in actual flames for the people she loves.
Right.
So, wow, your analysis sucks. Both of that is super depressing. I mean, only that it sucks because it bummed me out, not because it's not good thoughts. It just like really bummed me out.
Yeah, sorry guys. Hate to say it, but I just had to.
Wow. Well, you can tell, guys, that I was feeling very emotional and soft in this episode because I don't even know if I really have thoughts. I think I just have feelings. I kind of feel like that girl in Mean Girls when they're all in the gym and she goes up there and she's like, I just wish we could all eat a cake made of rainbows and sunshine. And remember, he's like, she doesn't even go here. And she just have a lot of feelings. That's who I am today. So obviously, I cannot go without talking about how Aelin and Rowan, they finally sealed the deal. They did the deed. Woohoo! And guess what, guys? After all of my complaining and impatience, when we finally got to that scene, guess what happened? I cried. Okay? I thought I was all going to be like, well. And instead, I was like, oh my God, their love is so beautiful. And actual literal tears were coming out of my eyeballs. Did not expect that at all. So that was super fun for me.
I know, you texted me and I was like, hi, why are you crying? And she's like, it was just so beautiful.
It was. We love each other so much.
I was just excited. I was like, hell yeah. Yes, they finally did it. And I was like, oh, go.
See, that's what I thought it was going to be like. But no, literally crying. So something else I feel like I just have to say is I don't know what it was about this set of chapters, but something inside of me has shifted. I have loved this series so far and I have enjoyed every minute of deep diving it. And of course, there have been some really devastating or emotionally shiver-inducing moments. But I don't think that I really felt it in the way a lot of people describe it. Pretty much every person I've ever talked to is like, it will literally change your brain chemistry. I have never been the same since I've read it. And let me just also say, I am an emotional person, okay? I feel like I have a relatively high emotional intelligence IQ. So it's not like I'm just like a soulless monster. I feel things very deeply. But I feel like I haven't gotten to the point where I feel like this book will foundationally alter me. And don't get me wrong, beautiful story, very touching. But now something about this set of chapters, I don't know what it was, but I feel it. I felt this internal shift. And I'm not even really sure that I can put it into words right now. But I realize that I am now deeply emotionally invested in this story. Not just what happens, not just defeating Erewhon, but like the emotional journey and well-being of the characters. And yeah, that excites me. It terrifies me because I don't feel good about everyone's fate. So I'm really worried.
That's a good point about the impact of this series, because it is predominantly the thing that you just kind of see all over social media or like hear from people is that it will change your life. It's just so good. And I kind of started to feel that after Heir of Fire, but Heir of Fire was also so personal to Aelin specifically that I was kind of waiting to see where the larger plot or like the larger picture was going to go. And now that we've entered into Empire Storms, I definitely really agree. I feel what you're describing as well, in the sense that you can tell, like the world is going to change.
You just know it's going to fuck you
forever.
up.
Yeah. So
we've been messaging one of our listeners a lot, and her advice was that Lorraine and I should hold hands and read the end together. And I was like, that's a good idea. We'll probably have to arrange that. But I don't know if I'm ready for Lorraine to see me ugly cry, because I'm going to let it flow. Just telling you.
And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to videotape you. Just kidding. for your reaction.
Wow. Okay. Lorraine's all about content. Okay. Content. You soulless monster. Listen, it's okay to cry. I'm okay with being emotionally vulnerable. I've cried on this podcast. Well, you have too, but not in Throne of Glass. So,
no, it's for something else.
You need to let the tears flow.
Well, I have let the tears flow. In the last set of chapters, I did post a reaction video. So they're there.
Yeah.
But by the time I get to recording an episode, I've already like emotionally processed. So I don't feel like I'm as quite as like, I don't know. I can't think of
sensitive.
Right
you desensitize a little bit to the moment.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Once you have to write notes about it. But you know what? Sometimes even when I'm writing notes, I'm like, this is still really sad.
Yeah.
So totally switching gears. On a more lighthearted note, we're going to play a fun little game in this episode.
Uh-oh.
Who's excited? So one of our beloved characters gave me the ick so bad in the set of chapters. And I want you to guess who it is and what they said or did to give me the ick. I will not reveal the answer until we get to that chapter. So you've got plenty of time to guess. And please, for my own personal entertainment, text us or DM us if you were right or wrong and who or what you thought this character did or said, or if you disagree with me, because even on a reread, I was just like, ugh. So I just want to see what other people think too.
Also surprised by that. We'll get there when we get there. I didn't know what you were talking about until I got to your part of the notes, and then I was like, oh, that's pretty on brand for you, I guess.
It is.
I didn't feel the same way, so we'll talk about it, yeah. But yeah,
no surprise there either.
Overall, though, I really enjoyed this set of chapters. Rowan and Aelin getting together. I did not cry. I was just very pumped and excited for them. I think it's just because they weren't in peril. Like, they were just having this nice, calm moment together. And I was just like, oh, this is really nice to read. How beautiful. But that being said, I 1000% agree that it was beautifully written. You are just so touched by their relationship with each other. And Team Fireheart buzzard forever. Buzzard. And then my last little thought here is just that I love seeing the different character paths and how they're slowly converging. Manon is now with Aelin and the crew, and I feel like Lorcan and Elide will be meeting with them somehow soon as well. So I haven't quite figured out how they're gonna come into it, but you know they are some way somehow because of the wyrkeys. And so just seeing all the threads not just exist, but now they're actually like twining together now. And so I'm very excited about that.
Oh yeah, Elide and Lorcan will be heading that way soon. They just have to. Yeah. Every time Aelin's like, we have purposely created circumstances so that our paths will cross with Lorcan again, is pretty indicative that they will. So it's just a matter of how and when.
All right, so that concludes our overarching thoughts. And now let's get into the chapters, starting with chapter 38.
To kick off chapter 38, Aelin and Rowan meet with Rolf to debrief after the battle. And to no one's surprise, Rolf is pretty pissed off. Understandably, Rolf wants to know what the hell just happened because to him, it looked like Aelin was about to blow his town to smithereens, which she sort of was. Aelin tells Rolf that her control slipped when Rowan confirms this. He says, magic is a living thing. When you are that deep in it, remembering yourself, your purpose is an effort. That my queen did so before it was too late is a feat in itself. And this got my brain going. First, it reminded me of at the end of Queen of Shadows when Dorian and Aelin joined their magic to destroy the Valg inside of the king and destroy the glass castle. The descriptions of their joining of magic read very, very similarly to how Aelin felt the deeper she went into her power. I strongly speculate that the reason that Aelin and Dorian didn't lose control then is because they had each other. Aelin was able to pull herself back when she sees Rowan, and so my guess is that because they were literally linked physically and emotionally and magically, that's why it didn't end catastrophically. Well, I guess sort of catastrophically because the glass castle did shatter, but they didn't they didn't lose themselves to their power.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
They didn't destroy themselves in the process. They just
exactly
caused some structural damage on the outside.
An entire glass castle. But other than that, everything was fine. Second, this reminded me a lot of the witches and what we learned about the quote-unquote yielding back in chapter 7. The description of that was, only when most desperate and most enraged could a witch summon the core of magic in her with devastating consequences. I would imagine a witch's magic is similar in that it is a living thing, and so if a witch were to engage in the act of the yielding, they would probably almost certainly risk losing control and likely losing themselves in the process. Obviously, we haven't gotten more details, so we don't know exactly what that entails. But based on the limited description we've gotten, it seems like it's a really big deal for a witch to do that.
Ooh, yeah, I really like that connection and big yikes on that one. But I will say, based off the descriptions that we've gotten about the yielding, I feel pretty sure that the price of calling upon the yielding quite literally sounds like the witch's life. So
I agree. And I think we're definitely going to find out more about that as we read, because I just feel like I hope it's not Manon, or, I mean, a witch we know is going to do that. Maybe as a weapon against them, or a witch we know is going to use it as a weapon to protect. So for sure, we're going to find out. Lastly, I feel very strongly this situation with Deanna is meant to warn us and foreshadow that this will likely happen again to Aelin. Maybe not necessarily Deanna taking over, but her going so deep into her power that she almost loses herself. I'm really terrified about that, because there's going to be more battles where Aelin feels like she has to give it her all. And, what if Rowan is not there to help pull her back in? And that's really scary to contemplate.
Yeah, I found that whole conversation to be pretty ominous. I definitely agree that without someone to anchor her and maintain a connection to the true living human mortal version of Aelin, it seems like she would not have been able to break herself out of the wyrd-key and Deanna's control, because ultimately both of those things are incredibly strong sources of power that outmatch Aelin in overall magical strength, I think. And then this response from Rowan indicates it's honestly pretty miraculous that Aelin was able to find herself at all, because she was so dangerously close to losing all control. This all just made me think once again about nameless is my prize.
Nameless is my prize!
Perhaps the potential price of possessing so much power or going so deep into one's own power is that you just lose all sense of who you are and your humanity, because the magic will just take over and basically use the body it inhabits as a means to an end.
Ooh. Yuck.
Yeah, big yikes. But aside from that, I also agree that this is not the last time we will see Aelin possibly be overtaken by the power she possesses, or even the gods, now that that's on the table. Just before this line that you mentioned from Rowan, Aelin tells Rolf, when you are blessed by Mala, you find that sometimes your control can slip. Aelin does not just bear the gift of firepower from Mala. It seems like she's quite literally a divine channel through which Mala reaches her. Plus, we strongly speculate Aelin is being used by the gods for a larger purpose. So by being Mala's heir, she has both inherited Mala's power and also, in a way, Mala's will. And in this case, her will is definitely pushing Aelin toward being the person who destroys Erewhon once and for all. And y'all already know I feel like that means sacrificing Aelin. So
I'll continue to point it out as we read, but I feel like there is a lot of sacrificial and fatalistic language used around Aelin, Rowan, and just in general around a lot of the characters. And that feels bad.
Yup.
This meant nothing to Rolf, who was still pissed that Aelin almost destroyed his town. But Aelin covers by telling Rolf that it looks to me like the pirate lord of Skulls Bay and long-lost Mycenaean heir has just allied with a young queen so powerful she can decimate cities if she wishes. It looks to me like you've made yourself untouchable with that alliance, and any fool who seeks to harm you, usurp you, will have me to contend with. To which I was like, damn, girl, tell Rolf what the fuck is up. But in all seriousness, she's not wrong. Word will definitely get out about this battle, and people will describe the quite literal volcanic-sized pillar of fire they saw, and how she quite literally blasted several ships into nothingness, which should make pretty much everyone scared of messing with Rolf, except for maybe Erewhon or Maeve. So I do think she has a pretty good point here.
Yeah, I do agree with that take, assuming that they can control the narrative. Because it's still kind of hard to say, but that was a concern, right? Is that people think that Aelin is just going around doing whatever. So as long as they can keep it as this no, I saved Skulls Bay from the Valg, then yes, I think they're good to go. Aelin is in control. Everyone should support her. So hopefully it stays that way. I do feel like Rolf highly benefits from this, since Aelin has established herself as someone capable of destroying the Valg fleet and forces, and therefore she's no longer just a myth, but kind of the answer to whatever's going on with the Valg and Erewhon. However, I do wonder if Rolf is maybe a bit worried that Aelin could very easily lose control because her power is so extensive. I think Rolf himself understands the costs of dealing with the gods, and we're about to get to his story shortly. So I did wonder if by telling Aelin, it looks to me like you were a little girl playing with fire too big for you to handle, he is reminding her that when it comes to like this really strong, powerful gift of magic, are you ever really truly in control? And I know that Rolf, I don't think, knows that she was overtaken by a god at this time. But I think from us, the perspective is that when you're dealing with the gods and God-given power, is it Aelin that's in control or is it the gods, So I think it just kind of brings up this question of like, are you inevitably always at the mercy of their bidding and will? We talked about this a little bit in the scene when it happened, but Aelin is really incredibly lucky that she didn't destroy the city, because had it gone in that direction, she would not be able to gain the public's general confidence in her. If anything, it would terrify people in a way that is not beneficial to her cause. So there's a fine line with what she's doing.
Oh, yeah. From a public relations perspective, that would have been disastrous. No crisis PR firm could have spun that to her advantage.
She needs us as her PR team.
No, literally. That's like some scandal level, like, where's Olivia Pope shit?
Yes.
Okay. Because ain't no way. Aelin prepares to leave, but Rolf stops her in her tracks when he asks her if she wants to know what it really cost Rolf to get his magical map. And I have to admit, I did not expect to learn the story behind it at this point, so I was actually very excited to learn the backstory.
Yes, retweet, agree, because I have been so curious about how he got his magic map hands. Honestly, I just wanted to know what the cost was, because you're like, was it his soul? Was it a bargain? How did this come to be? And so we can just check this off our list of outstanding questions, which is very satisfying because that's a very long list still.
Yes, and a lot of answers we'd like. So at least we can, thank you next on the next one,
Yeah.
Rolf tells Aelin when he was 16, he was barely more than a slave on a ship, and all of his money went back home to his mother and sister. One day, the ship got caught in a storm, and the captain refused to find safe harbor, and the ship sank. Most of the crew drowned, but Rolf managed to drift for a day before washing up on one of the islands of the archipelago in the Dead Islands. When he awoke, there was a man staring down at him who asked him what he wanted in life, and Rolf told him he wanted to be captain and the pirate lord of Skulls Bay. The mysterious man then told him he would grant him the skills he would need to do it, but it would cost him what he valued most in the world. Rolf, thinking that he had no money, no land, no valuables, that there wouldn't really be a real cost to him at all, said he would pay the price. When he next came to, the ink was on his hands, and he made his way back to Skulls Bay, and it wasn't until he saw his cottage with black sheets over the windows that he realized the price: the lives of his mother and sister. After finishing telling Aelin his story, he says, "That was the price of my power. What shall be yours, Aelin Galathinius?" First and foremost, Rolf's story is just really sad. He was obviously very young, had survived a shipwreck, and was, honestly like half delirious, super dehydrated. And so he really couldn't have known what he was agreeing to. Of course, it didn't even occur to him the price could be something not necessarily tangible. He even says in his story that he was like, not really all there. And so it's really sad that basically an unconscious person agreed to that. And so that made me really sad to hear that for Rolf.
I would also imagine that the gods are kind of like the Fae in that I'm sure they're kind of like crafty with how they present.
They're tricky with their words.
Right. And so it's easy to get tricked into a deal for something, and I don't know.
Yeah. Also, we have not officially been introduced to the god of the sea. We know there is a god because at the end of Queen of Shadows, Nesrin takes Chaol to the sea god's temple, and Chaol refers to him as the sea god and the god of oaths. I'm not sure if this is foreshadowing. We're going to learn more about the sea god or actually meet them in person, but I'm just going to note it here just in case, because obviously the gods are becoming an ever-growing part of the story.
Ooh, yes. I think it'd be really interesting if the sea god comes back into the picture again. I agree. I don't know if that's a for sure thing or not, but many of our characters have made oaths or promises to fulfill. So perhaps that could be like an avenue through which the sea god would come back. Like, did you keep your oaths? Did you keep your promises? Or like in some kind of way like that. But yeah, overall, the truth of how Rolf got his magical maps was definitely very tragic. And while Rolf may not have traded his soul specifically, I think his experience did mark his soul because the exchange for selfishly wanting more power was the death of his loved ones. And this backstory really adds a whole new layer to Rolf's character, and I think reframes why Rolf has been kind of resistant to Aelin. He himself has personally dealt with a god and has learned this lesson of consequences and paying a price to obtain power in some way. And while Aelin didn't ask to be granted her power or make a bargain with a god to get it, I do think Rolf is weary of anything that involves godlike magic or power because of his experience with the sea god. This also, I think, continues to feed into the general theme of how having great power is both a gift and a burden because of what you may be expected to do with that power.
We also have to talk about the question Rolf poses to Aelin. What will be the price of her power? And I gotta say, this filled me with dread. We know enough about Aelin's power to know that it is quite literally the definition of a blessing and a curse, and I feel very unsettled at what price she will pay to wield her power in the future.
Ooh, I'll tell you. It's nameless with my prize. I cannot get it on my head now, okay? But yeah, I think we are quickly seeing that there is something tragic in store for Aelin that we have yet to see. There's going to be a price, some way, somehow. Boo. Bad. No.
Lorraine. Aelin, no!
No!
Listen,
Deanna,
Lorraine,
no! Stay away.
we're only on page 9, and respectfully, I'm going to have to ask you to quit saying something bad is going to happen to Aelin. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown before the end of the episode. Aelin doesn't answer and instead storms out and takes off running towards an empty beach. Once at the beach, Rowan asks Aelin if she intentionally used the wyrd-key, and Aelin tells Rowan no. I was happy that we got clarification on this. Lorraine and I went back and forth on this in the last episode, and I'm happy that I was right, that she did not.
Okay. For the record, I agreed that she didn't use it for the main big joining of power with Rowan. I was just questioning the initial signal. But yeah, it's good to know it wasn't intentional.
Okay, Aelin doubter, whatever. Aelin is feeling very vulnerable and shares with Rowan how upset she is by what happened with Deanna. She says, she stole me, she took me, and I could feel her consciousness. It was like she was a spider waiting in a web for decades, knowing I'd one day be strong and stupid enough to use my magic and the key together. To me, this definitely means that the next time Aelin is going to really use her power, she cannot wear the wyrd-key because it's just too dangerous. It also confirms that Deanna hunted Aelin and watched her continuously waiting for the opportunity. In the last set of chapters, Aelin has a thought where she thinks maybe Deanna had been hunting her whole life, and this pretty much seems to confirm that. Elena also confirms this later when she reappears, which we'll talk about when we get there. This, to me, pretty much confirms Lorraine's thought that Deanna is actually a baddie bad, okay? That wasn't like a morally gray god thing. She sucks. Deanna really sucks. She may not be evil in the way that necessarily Erewhon and Maeve are, but she's definitely not on the side of good in what is morally right. Because even if gods have a different morality, blowing a town of innocent people is just bad. There's no justification for that. And it wasn't even like, if I blow this town to smithereens, the rest of the world will be saved, right? It was just like,
it was like a flex of power, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I totally agree. Also, just like a random side note that I didn't think of until you read the quote out loud. Wasn't Maeve always described as being like this spiderish figure? Or like she's always been kind of like,
oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And then also, I'm a little bit surprised you didn't mention anything about the Stygian spiders, because now Stygian spiders. Not that I think that the Stygian spiders are bad, but like we don't really know anything about them.
I kind of forgot about them. I'm kind of also like sidebar mentally obsessed with the Stygian spiders because I feel like they're important. But yeah, we haven't come back to them in a while.
Yeah, not since Manon's shenanigans to get the spider silk. So
that was back in Era of Fire too.
Anyways, calling somebody a spider equals baddie bad. Forever associated. But yeah, I agree that she really needs to be careful about using her power while wearing the wyrd-key because it will not only attract the Valg and Erewhon, but apparently also the gods. And I'm honestly super nervous for what will happen when Aelin uses it again. And we know there will definitely come a time when she will intentionally use it because her entire mission from the gods is pushing her towards getting the lock and then sealing the wyrkeys back into the word gate, yada yada. So kind of in relation to this, I will also be keeping the comment about fire and iron merging into silver and the whole a mere step thing that Deanna said in the last set of chapters flagged because I definitely feel the gods have something planned for that moment when Aelin does use the wyrd-key again. Now knowing that Deanna is kind of nefarious, it makes me nervous. Like something just feels off about it. I know she has to do this, but also I kind of don't want her to because then I'm like, she gonna get got and I don't want that.
She's gonna get got.
She don't get got.
Also, I realize we say that all the time. And if you haven't listened to us from the very beginning, in like the second episode of TOG, we were talking about Arab and Hummel. And I said something to the effect of like, yeah, because he can't get got. And I think that really stuck out to Lorraine because he's the best. And I think Lorraine just thought that was really funny because she's never heard that. And so now we have incorporated that into our daily life and vocabulary. Like, yep, can't get got because he's past his buck boy, you know? So
he did get got eventually, which was very satisfying. However,
true. So now we want Erewhon to get got and Granny B.
Yes, and Deanna.
Yep, and Deanna.
And Vernon. Our list is so long now.
Damn, everybody. Yep, all them baddie bads, we want them to get got.
Just rally them up.
Rally
through a word gate. Bye.
Rowan suggests to Aelin that it seems like they need to make finding the lock a higher priority because this is now the second time she's been told to find it. Rowan also says, perhaps it was a warning. Perhaps Deanna wished to show you how a not-so-friendly god might use you if you're not careful. I thought it was an interesting take from Rowan. I'm gonna entertain the possibility that he's right, but I still don't like Deanna.
By this point, y'all already know. If I said it once, I'm going to say it 1,000 more times. I feel like this is an actual possibility with the gods, and this is some foreshadowing for that. Everything is foreshadowing. God. Okay.
You're so obsessed with the gods. You have an unhealthy obsession with them.
I do, because I'm going to figure them out.
Well, why don't you predict that Deanna's shit, okay?
I am the reading detective. I have my detective hat on.
The conversation takes a turn towards more uplifting when Rowan jokes that he would hunt down Deanna if he could, and Aelin basically tells him he's insane and arrogant, which, duh. I mean, we all knew that. But also so is Aelin. So, you know, when you think about it, they really are the perfect match, and they match each other's energies so well.
Yup. I love this part so much when he tells her she's a haughty immortal. She's bound to slip up at some point. And besides, I have her sister on my side. Perhaps that's why Mala appeared to me that morning, why she gave me her blessing. I just love that Rowan is kind of giving a big F you to Deanna by counting on the gods to make mistakes and that they'll win together. I also wonder if perhaps Mala herself guided Rowan to Aelin so that she'd have someone by her side. I'd like to think that Mala at least is a good god, but maybe knowing that Aelin has a predetermined fate, she was trying to help her out a little bit. Also, like Mala herself gave up her immortality to be with Brannon, her lover, and so, I don't know, maybe she's a sucker for love.
You know, that's a really nice thought. I hadn't considered that, but it's possible that all the gods have known Aelin's fate for thousands of years or, you know, hundreds of years. And so in some small way, Mala was like, what comfort can I bring to Aelin or, you know, at least do something nice. So yes. Thanks, Mala, for
Rowan. Now. She brought Rowan.
Rowan reassures Aelin that what happened with Deanna changes nothing for him. He says, this new depth to your power, Aelin, changes nothing. What Deanna did changes nothing. You are still young, your power is still growing, and if this new well of power gives us even the slightest advantage against Erewhon, then thank the rutting darkness for it. But you and I will learn to manage your power together. You do not face this alone. You do not decide that you are unlovable because you have powers that can save and destroy. And I know that this is a long quote, but I just really love how supportive Rowan is of Aelin. That is actually probably my favorite thing about Rowan in terms of his relationship with Aelin. He is unfailingly supportive of Aelin. It goes much deeper and far beyond even just like loyalty, right? I feel very confident in saying that quite literally, no matter what Aelin does, Rowan will support her without fail. And that kind of dedication and love, I mean, it's beautiful. It really is.
You can't buy that kind of loyalty.
You cannot. Well, and like, I love Aelin, but she's kind of a tough person. She's a tough person to love in her own way, you know? Being romantically involved with her is not for the faint of heart.
Nope.
I also noted that instead of saying thank the gods, Rowan says thank the rutting darkness for it. And I feel like he has switched this up because pretty much everyone is mad at the gods, as they should be. Especially because he says, you know, thank the gods or gods above, and the witches say the darkness. So I thought that was kind of interesting that he switches his language there.
Just as like a random thought, the darkness is the afterlife or something? Is that how you took to mean?
I guess so. We haven't gotten a lot of clarification on what the witches exactly mean by that, but I imagine the darkness is something like where life is formed. They're born out of this sort of void. Dark void. Yeah, essentially, right? And then they go back into it. That's kind of what it seems like to me.
Okay. From the context, my understanding of it at this point is that it's like the afterlife or just like a different dimension type thing.
As far as we know, that sounds right to me.
Okay, we'll stick with that for now.
This quote also reminds me of the conversation that Aelin and Brandon had at the temple in Ilium back in chapter 15 when she asked him if the power ever gets easier to handle, and Brandon responded, yes and no. How it impacts your relationship with those around you becomes harder than managing the power, yet it is tied to it as well. And I feel like this quote accurately explains why Aelin is so upset, because she fears that this incident will change how people view her. It would not be unreasonable for people to become afraid of her and her power, and more importantly, afraid she can't truly control it, and people would naturally want to put distance between themselves and her.
Retweet. As a whole, with respect to like Aelin and Rowan's situation, I'm just very happy that she has Rowan in her corner, someone who knows her whole story, who understands her power and the burden that carries with her because of that, and who, as you said, is unfailingly supportive of her no matter what. And then also that callback to the convo with Brandon was also a really great point, because I think that will always be a deep fear for Aelin. She never wants to use her power for bad, but now that Deanna has exemplified the gods' ability to use her as they see fit if necessary, that is extremely terrifying, because how violating must that have been to know this otherworldly entity just took over and almost used you to do really terrible things. And Rowan is one of the few people who knows Aelin's truth. At this point, he is just someone that she doesn't have to justify her actions to. And I think he will continue to be an important support system for Aelin as she continues down this fated path, and will likely have to make many more tough decisions for the greater good. Rowan will never question her intentions behind those actions, I think. So
at this point, Aelin has been aflame and burned off all of her clothes, and she kneels in the water and Rowan kneels beside her. Rowan cheers her up with some lighthearted teasing, and things quickly turn steamy. And I'm not talking about the steam created by the ocean hitting Aelin's flames. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you for clarifying.
Well, I just want to make sure you guys are following along, you know? At first, when the scene started, I did not even get excited because I was like, oh no, let me guess, they're going to get interrupted, or Rowan's going to be like, I'm not taking you for the first time on a beach, blah, 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 whatever excuse they normally come up with. But then Rowan said, something tells me you might not mind if we were discovered, if someone saw how thoroughly I planned to worship you. And then I was like, wait, this is it. I was like, oh, baby.
Finally. Ugh, I was so happy for them. It's been such a long time coming, and they deserve it. They needed this time together because things are only going to get more crazy from here on out. So you got to take advantage when you can. But also, I didn't put this in the notes because I forgot, but it just came back to me. I will say sand.
Oh my God, I thought the same thing. Everywhere. Yes, there's no blanket or anything, and like
all the wrong places.
Not to get like too detailed, but they don't even have the protective barrier of some clothing, So they're like fully naked, rolling around in the water. If you've ever been on a beach, even when you get in the ocean to rinse off, when you get back to the house to rinse, there's still sand.
Yeah.
In places in your body. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and dried salt everywhere.
I just try not to think about that.
Fair enough. Yeah. Just ignore it and enjoy.
For the sake of the plot.
Yeah.
That's right. Aelin decides to be brave and finally tells Rowan that she's in love with him. I was really proud of Aelin in this moment because this is a huge, huge thing for her to finally say this to Rowan. Basically, everyone Aelin has ever loved has been taken from her parents, Sam, her court, her kingdom. And I do believe she really loved Chaol in the capacity she was able to at that time, but we also see how that worked out. So the one time that she did kind of risk her heart, it did not end well. So I was really proud of her for being vulnerable and trying again. Also, you have to remember from Aelin's perspective, she thinks he's still grieving over the loss of Lyria, which is why she said she knows there are limits to what he can give her and that he might need time. So that's like an even bigger risk because she thinks from the very get-go, Rowan is not going to be able to reciprocate in the same way because of his past, which I'm not going to ruin this moment by harping on this and debating it. I still have questions about that. But for now, I'm just going to let it be.
Yeah. As a whole, this scene was chef's kiss. I think it's so poetic because, yes, the version of Aelin that was with Sam and Chaol did love them in, as you said, whatever capacity she was able to at the time. But still, at the end of the day, I don't think she ever would have truly been able to love them because she hadn't yet loved herself. But Rowan was the person that helped her embrace who she really is. And they both helped each other out of their respective grief. And so for her to tell him that she loves him is just, it's so lovely because she has really found her equal in him. And he also obviously loves her unconditionally as well. I especially loved his response. I love you. There is no limit to what I can give you, no time I need. Even when this world is a forgotten whisper of dust between the stars, I will love you. Maybe I will cry. I'm not, but I might. Don't tempt me.
Give it up, Lorraine. Do it.
But I also thought it was so touching that Aelin thinks she was not afraid before she tells Rowan that she loves him. Rest in peace, Sam. Just as like a generic comment. I think everyone you meet helps you learn something about yourself. And Sam was the very first step to helping Aelin begin her journey back to herself, I think. So Sam's impact has continued to be carried throughout the series so far. It's really beautiful.
Aw, Sam. The more the series goes on, the more I retroactively appreciate Sam.
Yeah.
My complaint still stands that he has such little page time. We don't really get to appreciate him. But thinking about how he impacted Aelin's journey makes me feel more emotional towards him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now it is time, after 5.5 books and over 3,000 pages, the moment we have all been desperately waiting for. Aelin and Rowan make love. Per usual, we will not be going into all the details, but we'll definitely be bookmarking this chapter to read again for research purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, researching the mating bond, things like that.
I have a PhD to work on.
Exactly. We have our master's in Throne of Glass.
Research, yeah.
Yes, this is our dissertation, Yeah, 10-4 in that. Absolutely. But I will share a couple of my thoughts about this scene. I loved when Aelin is teasing Rowan and she says, "And you love me?" And Rowan responds, "To whatever end." Obviously, this is romantic as hell, but this is actually not the first time Rowan has said these words to Aelin. Aelin actually first says them to Rowan in Heir of Fire when she tells Rowan she wants to stay and fight and protect Mistward. She says, "Because I will follow you to whatever end." Then when Rowan swears the blood oath, he says, "I claim you, Aelin, to whatever end." And I just really love that line. Is something that links them through all stages of their relationship so far. There's a couple other times that line is used. Well, I just don't want to list them all out, but those are kind of the predominant ones. But it's nice that they have felt that dedication, that loyalty to one another pretty much from the very beginning.
Ooh, That's such a great callback. Thank you for putting that in there because I loved this line. But also, fair warning, I'm going to rain on the parade here. Now that this sacrifice to the gods is potentially on the table, I do wonder if to whatever end is going to take on a whole new meaning where Rowan has to quite literally follow her into the in-between or through the portal or whatever to another dimension in order to get Aelin back from the gods or from the wyrd or from Erewhon, Maeve, I don't know, whoever or whatever it is. I also feel like we're getting into this theme of love being the ultimate force that trumps everything. The gods ain't getting Aelin because love is stronger. Mala being a great example and her love for Brannon. That situation does give me hope that whatever is in store for Aelin, the love between her and Rowan will keep her safe in the end.
I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the way, you and I did a role reversal. Because remember, I'd always be like, I'm afraid they're going to die.
Yes, yeah. And
now listen to us.
I have made that my mission to bring it up at the worst possible times. So
thanks a lot. Thanks for that. I also chuckled when Aelin thought, oh gods, oh burning, rutting gods. Rowan knew what he was doing. He really gods damn did. And I was like, yeah, he does.
He better for being like 300 something years old.
Dude.
I don't know.
Okay. Seriously though, right? I know I mentioned this in my overarching thoughts, but y'all, I was crying during this scene. I was moved to actual tears because I just thought it was so beautiful. Everything about it, their love and trust in one another, the writing, just everything. In hindsight, I shouldn't really be surprised by my reaction because I actually feel like there's a lot of emotional buildup to this moment. And I think it really speaks to SJM's writing that I could feel even a fraction of what Aelin and Rowan feel in this moment. And so I think that's something that makes this scene so impactful, but also the series, is because there's so much buildup and it's so gradual. And you don't even realize that you've been holding your breath waiting for the catharsis to come. And so when it does, you're like, oh my God, I've been waiting so long. I also thought it was especially beautiful when it's described there were no words in his eyes, none in hers either. Words did not do it justice, not in any language, in any world. I love that part. I did also giggle a little bit when Aelin thought, oh gods, fae lovers, everyone should be so damn lucky to have one.
I totally agree. Again, I just found it really funny that you were crying during this because
Not you.
Not me. I was excited. I was amped up for them. But overall, it was a really good mix of being this beautiful scene with them while also, I think, still maintaining some fun and sass with like their personalities and as well. So I liked that. I also love that Aelin, who has never been conventional, asked Rowan if she can bite him. And then she asks, am I limited to your neck? But speaking of biting, Rowan confirms for us that biting her back in Heir of Fire was not random. In fact, it was basically like the very first indication that Rowan and Aelin were destined for the love that they have between each other. And he knew. He just knew.
Oh, yeah. When I read that, I remember you talking about that because I remember you were saying like he tasted something in her blood. And I was like, girl, what are you talking about? And you were like really fixated on that. But you know what? Turns out you were right.
They just knew.
They just knew. To close up the chapter, Rowan and Aelin decide once was not enough. And I actually thought this quote was interesting. When Rowan roared her name again into the star-flecked black, Aelin hoped the gods themselves heard it and knew their days were now numbered. Ooh. And obviously, I like this because I don't fuck with the gods right now. Maybe not ever again. But to be honest, I didn't quite understand what Aelin meant in this moment. So I wanted to ask you, Lorraine, what you thought she meant by this.
I'm surprised that you asked me this because I feel like you're gonna eye roll when I give you my answer, but I brought up many thoughts about the gods by this point, but I truly do think Aelin is gonna face some sort of situation where she is trapped by the gods or they swindle her somehow, and it's gonna be Rowan who brings Aelin back from being completely consumed by the power that she wields, like with the wyrkeys, for example. Also, just like thematically knowing SGM and her other series, we're pretty primed for a love conquers all kind of situation. And so that's what I think. but totally random side note.
What?
How do you think Rowan wrote Aelin's name? Do you think he was like, Aelin?
No, I definitely don't think it came out like that. I think it came out like, Aelin, something more like that. It is kind of funny, like, no spoilers for any other SJM books, but in general, when there are intimate scenes, there's always, like, this character roared in pleasure, and you're like, what? Lots of growling. Yeah, lots of animal-like sounds.
I would hate to be their neighbor. That's all I can say.
Oh, you don't even need to be their neighbor. You can smell them from a mile away.
Across dimensions. You can hear it all the way through the wyrd-key.
Oh my god. Y'all, just so you know, it's about to get goofy in here. Well, it already
has
is.
Gotten goofy, yeah.
It already is. We're off the rails. We're so giddy over Aelin and Rowan. We are not well. So everyone needs to go get a glass of wine right now so you can join in the fun. We're not drinking, but seems like we have been.
Okay, that concludes chapter 38. Moving on to chapter 39.
We switch to Rowan's POV as he thinks about how he and Aelin did the deed 2 more times after the first time on the beach. And apparently when Rowan and Aelin have sex, people need to watch out because during the second time, Rowan's magic had left 6 nearby palm trees in splinters.
Oh, also another completely random side note, coming fresh off another fantasy series where lightning strikes are associated with sex, I find it very funny that lightning was striking for them as well in this series.
Yeah, if Aelin and Rowan aren't careful, they could cause a natural disaster between the fire, the wind, the ice. They need to be real careful. Rowan thinks about how anyone who comes near them will be able to scent what they just done, and he thinks, ugh, this quote really gave me the ick. I had a hard time typing it out, and I do not want to say it.
This is not the ick that she's referring to, though, by the way.
Oh, yeah. This is not the ick to win the game. This is just something that I was like, ugh.
It's a little weird.
It's kind of weird when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Rowan thinks he'd marked her richer than the scent that had clung to her before, marked her deep and true, and there was no undoing it, no washing it away. She'd claimed him, and he'd claimed her, and he knew she was well aware of what that claiming meant, just as he knew. We discussed this last episode, but you guys know how I feel about the scenting thing, but it's funny because, when I'm reading the book just for the vibes, I really don't think about it that much, but when I'm deep diving and analyzing, it gives me the ick so bad. I'm just like, bleh. But in the book, I'm like, that's so romantic.
How nice.
I know, right?
He marked her deep and true.
Deep and true.
Oh my god. It's really just knowing that someone else knows that they've been doing it. I think
yes.
It can't stay personal. Like everybody else has to know about it now. And so just I don't want to be
Yeah, no, I'm good. I also did find it frustrating that despite it being 1,000,000% obvious, technically Aelin and Rowan do not officially confirm they are mates, nor do they address how it is possible for Rowan to have 2 mates, so I'm still waiting on that big time.
I'm glad you were the one to say it because people are probably tired of hearing me harp about this damn mate theory. Patience is wearing thin. It's non-existent at this point, so better be soon. I also found it really sweet that Rowan thinks he would try to live up to that honor, try to find some way to prove he deserved it. Somehow, he'd earn it, even with so little to offer beyond his own magic and heart. So this has been a previous discussion point, for example, with Darrow, and also within Aelin's own internal conflict about how she was going to balance her duties as queen and what her heart actually wants. And I think it's safe to say Aelin is officially making it clear she ain't marrying anyone that is not Rowan. And while I, as a reader, have zero problem with this, I think it's very sweet that Rowan is so honorable and wants to make Aelin proud, both as a lover and as his queen. Because he realizes, obviously, what they did complicates things politically, and they pretty much have to get those allies in the South, and wherever Aelin will call in these favors that are owed to her because they have axed any potential option for a marital-based alliance at this point. I'm not sad about that, but it's the truth.
Rowan and Aelin go back to the inn and realize ain't no way they were going to get away with just going to bed without explaining what the hell happened to Dorian, Edian, and Lysandra. I thought it was absolutely hilarious that as soon as they walked in the room, pretty much everyone could tell what had just happened, and Lysandra sounded off with, "Enjoy your ride."
Yes.
And then Aelin responded with, "Isn't that all these fae males are good for?"
That was like the best line from Lysandra, I think, like ever. That is like top tier. It was just so perfect.
Well, you know, everyone's thinking it, right?
Yeah,
Since
yeah.
Lysandra's like, "Oh, no one's going to say it. I fucking will."
Yeah.
She don't care. Rowan cannot control his inappropriate thoughts, but Aelin pretty quickly dumps a proverbial bucket of ice water on him when she takes the amulet of Orinth off her neck and tells everyone that it was the third wyrd-key, and then announced that it was time for Dorian to meet his ancestor, aka Elena Haviliard.
I will say, though, it's about damn time that she finally came clean to everyone about that wyrd-key. It's been a
Oh my
long time
God,
coming.
finally. I know. No, we have this thought in our Onyx Storm coverage that so often it's like if all the characters would just tell each other what they knew, it would solve
Yes.
so many problems. And it's so annoying. It makes me think back at the end of Calm. I want to take Selena, Kale, and Doran and be like, everyone sit down and share what the fuck they know, because there was this huge disconnect because people didn't tell each other things, and it drove me nuts. And I'm like, everyone needs to fucking tell everybody everything because it's really important all the time. Yes, it gets on my nerves. So I was happy she copped to it.
Same.
Aelin then tells him everything about the wyrd-key, how they tricked Lorcan, and how she'd been ordered not once, but twice to find the lock. Aelin began snuffing out candles and drawing word marks on the floor to call Elena, and after some time, Elena eventually appears to them, but the connection is noticeably weaker than previous visits because they are so far from her tomb in Rifthold. Honestly, all I could think about at this point were those old Verizon commercials where the guy goes to all kinds of crazy places and he's like, "Can you hear me now? How about now?"
And the tagline is "Switch to word marks now." You know.
To make long distance phone calls.
Yeah. Wait, that's so funny. Because Elena was like, "I can't hear you. She's like, weak."
But tell me why that was such bullshit. I feel like she knew she was in trouble. And so she did the thing where she took like a candy wrapper and she was like, "It's breaking. I can't hear. It's breaking up." You know, and I was like, "Yeah, that's fake as fuck, Elena. That's fake as fuck."
That's true. It was really funny that Aelin called her out and was like, yeah, whatever. Like, start talking, you know? So
Aelin is not fucking around anymore.
If anything, she's got quite sassy in the last set of chapters.
I
It's like, what,
like,
girl? Like,
kind of downright disrespectful. I'm like, girl, that's your ancestor. Like, you need to calm down a little bit. But
also, I do feel like this was foreshadowed when, I forget what chapter 12, when they're coming into Ilium. And there was that line about how she brought magic books and Damaris with her and she like kept them in their saddlebags. And I remember wondering what she was going to use those for. And it seems like she's going to summon spirits with it. So, yeah. So just as Elena's spirit appears, I did find it notable that Dorian is the only one who kneels and bows for her and then recalls he was the only one who'd spoken to Elena's mate, Gavin. He tried not to consider what it meant now that he carried Gavin's sword, Damaris. I think this continues to reinforce Dorian's importance to the plotline as part of a lineage that has been in this unfinished game with Erewhon. I also continue to wonder if Dorian will be using Damaris in some significant way, just as Gavin did way back in time. Plus, we know Dorian's magic. Magician. I don't know how that happened. Dorian's magician.
oh my God, Dorian is technically a magician. So is Aelin. They're all magicians.
They're magicians. They're real magic.
That makes him sound so much less scary, less intimidating.
And like way less cool also.
Aelin was a very powerful fire-wielding magician.
Okay, but now we can definitively say that Dorian's magic has divine origins, which we'll get to shortly. And so got a lot of questions about Damaris and what he's going to do with that sword. So
Aelin is not in the mood for any more games with the gods and gets right down to business. She asks Elena, why is Lorraine laughing? Addison does not know.
I didn't mean for this to be an innuendo, but I said swinging a sword. I just put it together and I was like, oops.
Dorian's gonna be swinging that sword later, you know what I'm saying?
With Manon? Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Lorraine needs to go take a chill pill, guys.
Where's my bucket of ice water?
Let me just try this again. Aelin is not in the mood for any more games of the gods and gets right down to business. She asks Elena why Deanna appeared that day, what exactly is the lock, and what did Deanna mean by calling her the queen who was promised. As you guys know, I really don't fuck with Elena because she has done us dirty too many times, and Aelin pretty much feels the same way. I thought it was funny when Elena looks at Dorian and is all ethereal and says, "Rise, young king." And then it's described, Aelin snorted, "Can we not play the holier-than-thou ancient spirit game?" And then she's trying to get her attention and she's like snapping her fingers. She's like, "Ahem. Okay, hello, can we just focus?" And I'm like, I love you because I do not like Elena. So
it is funny. She's just so impatient and over her bullshit cryptic answers at this point. So, because honestly, the longer Elena stalls, the less answers we freaking get. Because we barely get answers from her in the first place. And so someone had to tell her.
Preach, girl, preach. Elena then gives a very unsatisfactory answer about Deanna and basically was just like, yep, she's a god, her moral code is different, and time isn't the same for her, which is not really a surprise. Elena also confirmed to us that Aelin, in fact, did not use the wyrd-key on purpose, and basically it was just an accident that Aelin's magic touched the wyrd-key, and that's what allowed a door to open. She also warns that Deanna will not forget that Aelin shoved her out before she was ready, and it's definitely coded as an ominous warning. So now I am a little worried we need to be on Deanna lookout because, well, she's an angered goddess, and I feel like she will be looking for retribution.
Oh, yeah, big time. That comment about Deanna not soon forgetting the insult is definitely worrisome. I do not think the gods are done scheming with Aelin. In fact, I'm worried Deanna is probably going to permanently be lurking around the portals now, just waiting for Aelin to use her magic with the wyrd-key again so that she can nab her up. Just wait.
Nab her up.
Yeah. Hide your kids. Hide your wife.
Hide your wife.
Hide Aelin. Hide your wyrd-key.
Aelin then calls Elena a liar and confronts her about lying about Erewhon being dead and leaving him for them to deal with. I thought it was interesting that Elena tells Aelin, "You were meant to retrieve the wyrd-keys before Erewhon could get this far." This really got me thinking because when you combine this with Deanna calling her the queen who was promised, it makes it seem like Aelin specifically has been a pawn in the games of everyone to defeat Erewhon long before she even existed.
Yes. I still stand by the idea that the queen who was promised is not a prophecy, but a warning from the gods that they will get who was promised to help them fight in this war against Erewhon. And if they don't, there's going to be hell to pay for them.
It also makes me wonder what the plan was supposed to be. Presuming it was always supposed to be Aelin to retrieve the keys, what happened that they didn't count on that changed the timeline, right? Elena presumably is saying, yes, Aelin, you were always meant to have this power, do all these great things, but you were going to get the keys in the lock. And then it kind of sounds like basically she was going to banish Erewhon somehow. My best guess is that they didn't count on the King of Otterland waking Erewhon. That was an unknown variable at the time. And so instead of it coming to pass in the way they'd anticipated, obviously the king awoke Erewhon. Erewhon took over Parrington's body and, kicked off the whole thing. That's my best guess. I couldn't really think of any other reason why it didn't work out that way.
I do agree that the King of Otterland releasing Erewhon obviously puts a very big dent in the plans with the keys, and that's part of the issue. But I also think Elena was the very first thing that went wrong. Based on what we know and what we learn, it sounds to me like Elena using the lock was a really bad move. We don't know when the lock was crafted exactly, but we learn Mala created it, presumably with the intent of sealing shut the wyrd gate permanently with it, because that is what we've been told the lock will do. Elena in this convo tells them that she didn't know what the lock was supposed to be used for and that she'd been paying for the crime of using it ever since, meaning she was not supposed to have used it. But then, because Elena did use the lock and it only had it's a single purpose lock for whatever reason, this then screwed up whatever plan they had to use it with the wyrd gate and presumably Erewhon. So then I think the gods and whoever else is involved with all this had to pivot and wait for someone of Mala and Brandon's lineage to be born with, Mala's fire, who would then be strong enough to use the wyrd keys and lock because Elena says its power had already been used up, aka I'm taking that to mean it needs to be replenished somehow. They're going to have to like charge it back up, or I don't know, whatever they did to put power in the lock in the first place, it's probably going to need more. So then my guess is that the person who can do all of this ended up being Aelin, thus sealing her fate to also be used by the gods in all of this. That's my master theory about how all of this is playing out right now. Another question I have is, what's going to happen to Aelin when she inevitably does have to use the wyrkeys and her power together to presumably put everything back in the word gate, and then, the lock as well?
Just based on what we know about how magic works and what kind of power and magic is going to be needed to pull that off, it does not leave me with any good feelings about how it will go for anyone, whether it be Dorian, Aelin, both of them, Rowan. I mean, anybody that has powerful magic associated with Aelin.
Right.
So I agree. Surprise, surprise, Elena does not have time to explain, but she emphasizes that was the only, in italics, choice she could make. Next, we get an important download about the lock. We'll review what we learned, and then we'll tell you our thoughts. Elena tells them that there was once a great city in the heart of the stone marshes in Eyllwe. Brandon obtained the lock at a terrible cost, the cost being Elena's mother, aka Mala Firebringer's immortal life. The lock could seal anything and could only be used once, but Brandon never told Elena anything about the lock until it was too late. So Elena took the lock and sealed Erewhon in his tomb. She put the remnants of the lock there to commemorate the lives lost during the battle against Erewhon. And then a few days later, a great quote-unquote cataclysm rocked the land and the city sank. No one ever retrieved the lock, thinking its power had already been used. First and foremost, the lock is described as being a bit of metal and glass. I racked my brain, but I really couldn't think of any object that it could be. Metal and glass could really amount to anything, because I thought maybe it's something we've actually been exposed to in the series before and we didn't realize it, or something that's been referenced in like a historical context, but I came up totally empty-handed on that. I also found it annoying that Elena could share all of this info, but couldn't spare a few more seconds to explain exactly what the lock was and how it functioned. Like literally any bit of identifying info would have been helpful, and instead, she conveniently ran out of time for that,
Of course. So I definitely agree about the fact that Elena, as a whole, does not provide enough useful information. She says like one tiny little nugget, and then the rest of it is just like confusing, cryptic stuff that helps no one. However, I will say in this case, I genuinely don't think Elena knew. It sounds like she basically stole the lock and used it herself before she figured out how it was made or any of the limitations around its like single use. Thus why it was such a huge mistake for her to have used it for the wrong purpose. In terms of the bit of the metal and glass, I did wonder if this is related to how Deanna had said flame and iron together bound merge into silver to learn what must be found. Maybe the lock is made of iron or it's made of silver or something. Those are the only two metals that came to mind for me. So
I also wondered if the great cataclysm that rocked the stone marshes was a purposeful act of something evil or an act of the gods to conceal the lock so no one can get it and repair it and seal Erewhon away again. Maybe Maeve, maybe Deanna. Or, you could go either way, right? Like either they did it to hide it from Maeve and Erewhon, or they did it to hide it from anybody trying to put Erewhon away. So I was very curious about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that, but them gods are baddie bad, so
we don't trust them. We don't trust them for 1 minute, okay? I also wonder if the lock remnants are actually there, or if we're going to go through all of this trouble to get it, and surprise, surprise, it will have been stolen long ago.
Oh, that would be, can you imagine? That would be so annoying.
I can. I'd be fucking pissed.
And I guess for that specific reason, because it would just be like, it would just be so aggravating. I feel like they will find it. But I do kind of believe Elena when she says that it's broken because she used up its single-use purpose. So who since then would have replaced the power or fixed it if it's been like buried in the stone marshes this entire time? Another reason why I think it probably actually is broken is because, okay, this is a theory. Duke Parrington and King of Otterlin messed it up somehow to unleash Erewhon from the tomb in the first place, right? Because someone had to open the tomb back up, right? Elena sealed Erewhon inside. Tweedledee and Tweedledum came along, opened it back up, and then whatever they did to the lock probably messed it up, which, now that I say that, does kind of circle back into your question of, is it even really still in the marshes? Because if Duke Parrington, and Duke is actually Erewhon now, saw that it was a lock, I'm assuming Erewhon probably may have known what it was, right? Unless it was totally kept a secret from him and he didn't know. But if he did know,
he would have been sealed away.
No, but like after he's released, like after he got out of his tomb, then maybe he didn't know initially, but after seeing the lock on his tomb, he'd be like, what is this magical object that just stuck me in this tomb for however long? And so then he'd probably be incentivized to get rid of it or do something with it, right? I don't know. The more that I think about it, great question. Maybe it's not actually there. And now...
shit.
Yeah, damn it.
Aelin tries to brush Elena off, but Elena gets upset and tells them, my mother died to forge that lock. And this is when we get the big reveal. Aelin asks Elena who her mother was. Surprise, surprise, but not a surprise to us because we guessed this back in Nightfall. Mala Firebringer was Elena's mother. Elena does not even bother confirming this because by the time Aelin looked back, Elena was already gone. First and foremost, we were right about that. Another W for the Booked on Fantasy podcast.
Put them up.
Wow. Oh my God, did you ever do that? Wow, Mom.
Yeah.
With your fingers, for those of you that are just listening, you take your 3 middle fingers and you hang them up and you put them over your mouth and you go, wow, Mom.
We're so cool.
We're cool as fuck, obviously.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. It was very nice to get this confirmation, but honestly, it was like so canon at this point that I stopped waiting for the confirmation. So when we did get it, I was like, oh yeah. No,
yeah, that was pretty much a foregone conclusion for me. Actually, I am really excited because when we first got introduced to the idea that Brandon got his power from Mala, I speculated that maybe that was his mother or his lover. And so I was wow, I got really close like right away. So I've been happy about that. Next, I thought it was so annoying that when Aelin asked her who her mother was, instead of just answering the question with 3 words, Elena has to say this instead. She who loved my father best, she who blessed him with such mighty gifts, and then bound herself in a mortal body and offered him the gift of her heart. And I was like, bruh, just say Mala. Just say that instead. Okay, you're wasting precious time. 3 words would have been better than 20. Okay, Mala Firebringer. How hard is that?
She's wasting minutes on her phone.
She didn't pay for the unlimited. She was too cheap.
But honestly, like, no wonder Aelin is so short with her. Like, she cannot be direct. It always is a cryptic riddle with too many words. And I'm like...
But this does make so much more sense when you think about Aelin's power because Mala Firebringer is her ancestor as well as Brandon, who was also extremely gifted with magic and power. So that really puts things in perspective into why Aelin is particularly powerful. Aelin also points out that Mala's blood also flows in Dorian's veins because he is a descendant of Gavin and Elena. With this confirmed, it seems like Aelin directly inherited Brandon's firepower while Dorian inherited Mala's gifts. Back in the Nightfall chapter, there's a description of Elena's power that says, the raw magic in her veins now danced from flame to water to curling vine to cracking ice, not an endless abyss like her father's, but a versatile, nimble gift of magic granted by her mother. And this description aligns almost identically to how Dorian's magic has been described so far. So I thought that ancestral lineage connection in terms of how power was inherited was interesting.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. However, I think we've hit a fork in the road because I read it the opposite way. I felt like this was indicating...
What?
Well, okay, let me explain. I feel like it was indicating the extremely strong fire is from Mala, which she gifted to Brandon, and then which Aelin also inherited. But since Mala was a god, her offspring could also get just really strong general magic. And then I thought that's what Elena and Dorian have. Because Aelin is the heir of fire and Mala is Mala Firebringer because her most potent power, I'm assuming, is this all-consuming, ultra-powerful firepower. That almost sounds like only certain people are strong enough to even wield or like handle that kind of firepower. Plus, the one power the Valg also fear the most.
True.
So I don't know. I guess I could go either way. But in either case, the reason for anyone having fire or raw magic seems to stem from Mala. No matter what, Mala is the reason any of them
Yes.
got
agreed.
It.
Yes.
Mala she got it from
the beginning
her
of the
Mala.
power.
Yeah.
She got it from her. Oh my God. That is the best thing you've ever said. I want that on a sticker.
I'm actually pretty
She got
proud
it
of that
from her
one, yeah.
Mala. You should be proud of that. That was amazing.
I didn't even,
I like it.
Yeah.
Dorian asks Rowan if it's truly possible for a god to become mortal, and Rowan says, I've never heard such a thing, but Fae have given up their immortality to bind their lives to that of their mortal mates. At this, basically everyone in the room tries to look literally anywhere else other than at Rowan and Aelin, and I feel like this is definitely foreshadowing that Rowan and Aelin will at least have this conversation about Rowan giving up his mortality to bind his life to Aelin. However, the more I thought about it, the more unlikely it seems, at least for a good long while. One, they don't even know if Aelin is immortal or not, or she at least may have an extended lifespan. She could go through the settling process and end up with either, and that would definitely impact Rowan's decision. And two, this one is a real bummer. There's a good chance Erwan will kill them both, and it won't matter anyway. Either way, I think Rowan would do it in a heartbeat, no questions asked, but it would be very senseless for him to do it until they know how Aelin ends up immortality-wise, because she doesn't even have to necessarily settle and be immortal. She could just have a long lifespan by virtue of her magic, right? They had that similar thought about Aedion. They don't know what Aedion's lifespan will be because he's a demi-fae, and some demi-fae are naturally gifted with longer lifespans. So maybe Aelin's lifespan is 300 years. We don't know. And neither does Rowan. And so I'm sure they will discuss it, but ultimately it will be like, let's wait and see.
Yeah, those are really good points. I guess the first thing that came to mind for me was the settling option, since that had come up in the last set of chapters, and now they're kind of talking about it again. So that's kind of like my main thought of how the discrepancy between one of them being mortal, one of them being immortal is going to get resolved. I know they're talking about Rowan in this context, but I feel like maybe Aelin is going to be more so the person who actually is the one who ends up changing her mortality in some way. Because I guess just, again, thinking about other SJM books, I wonder if Aelin will get the chance to become immortal because of the firepower that she's been given. Her whole fated role in defeating Erwan is going to basically serve as some sort of test. And if she passes and defeats Erwan, the gods will grant her immortality, or I don't know, something like that at the end. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Like, because of your great sacrifice, we'll bestow a gift on you.
Yes.
I could totally see that happening. Absolutely. Yeah. Aelin decides that tomorrow morning they will sail to the Stone Marshes to hunt for the loch. Half of Rolf's fleet will go and find the rest of the Mycenaeans and then sail for Terrasen. The other half will stay and guard the Dead Islands, and a few ships will accompany them to Eyllwe. At first, when I read this, I was a little confused by these orders because we know Rolf's fleet was almost completely decimated before Aelin even arrived in Skulls Bay. And then, of course, Rolf's ship was destroyed in the most recent battle. I had it in my notes at one point that Rolf only had 8 remaining ships total. So I was kind of like, okay, so 4 ships will go to Terrasen, 2 will stay in the Dead Islands, and 2 will go to the Stone Marshes.
Right.
That's really nothing. What do you mean? Like, that's
what armada?
Yeah, right? I literally, what armada? This really bothered me because I was like, just let it go, Addison. It's not important. But you know what? If we're going to get our PhD in TOG, it matters.
True that.
I went back and reread it, and it actually says only 7 captains of Rolf's depleted armada were on the island. So reading that again, that now reads to me like Rolf definitely has more ships than that. It's just that only 7 of the captains and their ships were currently stationed there. So I'm not saying he has like a huge fleet, but it does seem like he has more than what I originally thought. So I think I misunderstood that, basically.
Oh, I definitely misunderstood that. So thank you for doing that research. and clarifying it because I was confused too. But I guess to further the point that he probably does have more ships, I feel like it probably stands to reason he does have more because I don't think Aelin would have tried so hard to get his armada fully in
for 8 ships. I know, right?
Not worth that Valg attack for 8 ships.
For 8 fucking, one of which she destroyed. Everyone calls it a night and goes to their rooms, but Dorian can't stop thinking about everything that Elena said. He thinks about how back in Calm, Gavin had appeared to him to stop Aelin from opening the portal, but now he wondered, perhaps Gavin had done it not to spare Aelin from damnation, but to keep those waiting, cold-eyed gods from seizing her as Deanna had today. So this line, I was like, oh, damn. I definitely wonder if that was at least part of Gavin's motives. I actually went back to Calm and reread this part, and I thought it was really interesting retrospectively that when Nehemia appears in the portal in Calm, she says, I came here because you need to be warned. Do not, emphasize in italics, open this portal again. The next time you do, I will not be the one who answers your call, and you will not survive the encounter. And at the time, I think we speculated that if Aelin opened another portal, she might accidentally call another monster or creature from another realm, sort of like what happened in Calm. But now it 1,000 million trillion billion % seems like Nehemia was warning her about the gods.
Ooh.
I know.
Dude, you just blew my mind, and I am 100,000% on board with that. Thank you for going back and rereading that. I'm sure if we go back and reread TOG from the beginning at this point, we're just going to be full of like all of these,
yes.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. OMG, why?
Yeah, literally. But I totally agree with respect to Dorian's thought about Gavin. And I actually found it notable that he doesn't think Gavin intervened to spare Aelin from damnation, but instead to keep the gods from harnessing Aelin's power for their own use. That implies to me that Aelin is considered this divine vessel. And since she already has divine power, I feel like this, again, continues to feed into the idea that Aelin will be sacrificed. Damn, I said this so many times in this episode.
That. I know. I'm like, oh my God, Lorraine.
I feel like I just like kept forgetting every time I talked about it. So I'm like, here I go again, talking about sacrifice.
Were you drinking some wine while you're doing these notes? And you were just like,
no, I think I'm just like really keyed in on this right now. So if there's another note in this episode, I will just like not say it, guys, to spare you from that. So
or just say like, repeat my previous note that I've said it 7 times already. Yes, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's not a bad note. It's just really...
I'll shut up now.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm trying to work here. Okay. I also thought it was really interesting when it was described, he, and he being Dorian, he tucked the speculation away to consider when he was less prone to leaping to conclusions, but the threads lay in a lattice across his mind, in hues of red and green and gold and blue, glimmering and thrumming, whispering their secrets in languages not spoken in this world. Of course, I had to point this out because it sounds an awful lot like the loom of the three-faced goddess, or other descriptions we've gotten about the threads of fate. And you guys know I love that shit.
The threads of fate. I definitely found it notable that Dorian is taking all this information in and making the larger connections about the nefarious intentions of the gods. Dorian is definitely going to be an integral part of defeating Erewhon in the end, as we've speculated. But on a separate note, I found the colors he mentions interesting because I think it maybe like symbolically links all the different storylines from our main characters and signifies that they're all coming together for a reason, and Dorian can sense that they are all needed for this big mission to defeat Erewhon. To do some color analysis, I feel like red could be in line with Manon because of like the red Kraken cloak and her being a long-lost Kraken queen, but it could also be for Dorian since Aderlin's colors were red. Green could be for Terrasen, aka Aelin. And then I'm also going to loop gold in there as well, both for Terrasen, but also as just like her power. Alternatively, gold could be for some of the other allies we have yet to meet.
And or Aelin, because remember it's always described they have golden hair. Like the golden-eyed prince. Yeah, I feel like you could make gold work for a lot of different characters.
And then I was thinking blue for Dorian because of his sapphire eyes. And then also, you know, being a Haviliard. I couldn't think of a different color association for blue outside of Dorian. So I'm going to think on it.
I hadn't really considered the colors of the threads until you mentioned it. But as soon as you started talking about it, it made me think of the color of Aelin's flames. Oftentimes they're described in hues of reds and golds and blues.
Yeah.
And so since he's specifically thinking about Aelin right now, maybe it's more in reference to Aelin's fate specifically in the colors of her power.
Too. Yeah.
Either way, though, I feel like it's indicative of something. They depart the next morning for the stone marshes, and Rolf gives them some vague coordinates for the lock because it seemed likely the lock had wards around them protecting them from exact viewing on Rolf's map. As the ship leaves the harbor, Dorian can't help but watch Aelin, and I thought his thought was beautiful, but also really ominous and haunting. He thinks, and he wondered if Aelin was somehow watching the archipelago and the seas and the skies as if she might never see them again. Not to repeat everything Lorena said the entire episode, but I can't explain why, but this just gave me chills. It just felt like foreshadowing for Aelin's fate. And I don't want to say it because, well, I don't want to. And, he has already said it. So I'm going to let you guys infer what I'm getting at, because what would have to happen to Aelin so that she never saw these things ever again? Your guess is as good as mine.
All right. This is me refraining from the comment that I wrote in because I was about to repeat it again. Yeah.
It's funny that you vowed not to say it again, but this is a time when you actually really needed to say it. We think Aelin's going to get got, okay? That's what we think.
Yeah.
3 days later, they were almost out of the archipelago when Dorian's magic sensed something. They saw something in the distant skies and very quickly realized it was a single wyvern carrying a witch. Everyone begins to prepare to fight, but Dorian, realizing it was Manon, began screaming for everyone to stop. Aelin then orders everyone to hold their fire, and they watched as Abraxos circled and Manon slid off Abraxos' back and fell into the water.
I know Manon is in a critical state, but I am super excited because we have just been waiting for their paths to cross, and now they finally have. I am mostly excited because we're going to get some more Hello Princeling, Hello Witchling action.
All right, so that ends chapter 39 and also ends part 1 of Empire of Storms. Part 2 is called Fireheart and starts with chapter 40. To kick off the chapter, we're back with Elide. The Carnival Troupe has been slowly making their way due east towards the coast. And just a quick timeline update, I believe based on this description, it must be close to Samhain, which is a holiday we learned about back in TOG. Aelin teases Chaol and asks if he will be summoning any spirits, and Chaol responds with, "It's a silly holiday to celebrate the coming of winter. The bonfires just produce ash to cover the fields." At the beginning of this chapter, Elide knows that the farmers are burning their fields left to fallow, and old Money Eyes Molly tells Elide so the ashes might fertilize the earth for next year's harvest. So I'm guessing it's around Samhain time now, which means it's literally only been a year since the middle of TOG. And my only thought about that is what the actual fuck, because so much has happened, okay? But I should also add, later Lorcan suspects that the fires were set intentionally to cloud the skies and hide the scent of the ilken coming. But I still think it has something to do with Samhain, because that would indicate that the ilken were going around having them light the fires after they left the area. I don't know. That didn't really seem right to me, so I'm going to go with my thesis.
I guess I'm a little confused about the timeline too, because I was under the impression it was the middle of summer, big question mark. But I think at the end of QoS, when they blew up the clock tower and shattered the glass castle, that all took place on the summer solstice. And if we're working with a normal real world calendar, that's June 21st, right?
That sounds right to me.
Someone check me. Okay. And then at the beginning of Empire of Storms, there was a line in chapter 2 that said they were in the height of summer. So then I was guessing that's probably, I don't know, somewhere around mid-July or early August. But I guess it's possible they're in fall already. I don't know.
I think they wait around in Rifthold for a week or two. Then they travel to Terracin, and I think that takes a couple of weeks. Then they go from Terracin to Skull's Bay. Like, weeks of time are passing in travel. Right. When you start adding up that, very quickly you're like, oh, depending on where QoS ends, it could be end of September or early October, whatever. So either way, we're just going to note it as a timeline note and just make of that what you will. Elide had very few customers for her fortune telling because Mr. Muscles Lorcan was putting on a show. Elide goes to see what all the fuss was about, and I was cackling and kicking my feet in the air when Elide thought, but what he lacked in charm he made up for with his shirtless, oiled body. And holy gods,
God's above that body. Elide's like, body, yada, yada, yada.
Oh my god, that's too good. Elide realized she was ogling him just like all the other townswomen and was about to go back to her tent when Molly told her she was lucky that Lorcan still looked at her the way he did. Before I share my thoughts about this comment, I just have to say that I love that even in a fictional world, all these women, married or not, are all huddled together, giggling and watching this very hot shirtless man. Because I feel like in real life, that would happen. Like all the same thing. We'd be like, oh, it's for a show. Oh, we're supporting the arts, you know?
Cue, like, literally the whole industry of Magic Mike.
Yep, pretty much. This comment from Molly made me think about basically every Hallmark Christmas movie where the two characters who are obviously going to fall in love have a moment where someone doesn't know that they aren't together and they're like, oh, it's so nice the way he looks at you. And then the character's like, huh? What do you mean? And then they realize that they actually love each other. And I desperately want that to happen with Elide and Lorcan.
First of all, I'd like you to do that accent again because
Which
I loved
one?
It. Your southern accent on that.
You like my southern accent? Well, let me see. Oh, where she's like, it's so nice the way he looks at you.
Yeah.
You like that?
Yeah.
You know, if I didn't think it would drive people absolutely nuts, I would do a whole episode in that accent. It would not be hard for me. To get back on track, Elide is waiting for quitting time when Lauren appears all hot and sweaty. Elide notes that Lorcan was in a rare good mood, and Lorcan tells Elide that 2 women and 1 man offered a spot in their bed. Naturally, as women are wont to do, she picks a fight over this because she's jealous as hell. But she doesn't know she's jealous at this moment.
Oh, 1000%. And honestly, I think it's because she's worried this could like pull him away from her. She doesn't want him to leave. But I also thought it was so funny that Elide asked if he sold his shirt too. And Lorcan's like, hell yeah, I did. Got 10 coppers from a farmer's wife. And I was like, I mean, easy money for him, so why not?
I like how it's always described like basically everyone in Aurelia is living in poverty, and meanwhile these women are like, well, I can't feed my kids, but here's 10 coppers for that shirt.
And like it's a farmer's wife, like she's married and stuff to him, but she's like, sure, let me buy this shirt from another man.
It's pretty clear that Elide gets upset when she thinks about Lorcan leaving because anytime they start to squabble, she always brings that up. And of course, we later learn the true reason she doesn't want him to go. Elide thinks she could barely make an impact at a backwater carnival. What the hell would she do in a court of such powerful people, especially without being able to read? While Aelin could destroy kings and safe cities, what the hell would she do to prove her worth? Wash their clothes or clean their dishes? I know we always kind of make fun of like, but I can't read.
I have no map.
And I have no map. That part is funny, but when you think about it, it is really sad that even that was kept from Elide. And I think her character's trauma is really starting to shine through here. Elide doesn't realize her own self-worth and that just being herself, she has a lot to offer Aelin. She has a very cunning mind. She's very smart. She's very perceptive. All of those things make her extremely valuable. Once Lorcan leaves Elide, she'll have to actually make her way to Terrasen, and that means facing her fear that even Aelin, her queen, will deem her worthless.
I totally agree with that. I think we kind of touched a little bit on this last episode too, but I also feel like her fear of being deemed worthless is exacerbated by magic being free again. Elide's been wrestling with her identity over having Blackbeak blood and yet not seeming to have any visible magic or like typical qualities of a Blackbeak. I can imagine that the situation of knowing you have magical lineage, but not enough for it to manifest in a power is also tough now that she's been exposed to all these horrible magical creatures like the ilken. She literally has Lorcan, this giant hulking fey male, in her presence. Even Aelin herself is like this great fire-breathing bitch queen, you know? So she's got a lot to contend with, and I think that affects her a little bit too.
Lorcan asks Elide why she doesn't also have a little fun, and Elide tells Lorcan she's never been with anyone that way. Lorcan then asks why, and Elide feels this sudden urge to tell Lorcan everything about her past and who she was. Just as she was about to, the screaming started.
Oh, what an inopportune time for the ilken. Like, why now?
I know.
Because they were having such a good conversation. I wanted them to reveal their truths. But I do think the fact that she finally got to a point where she wanted to confide in Lorcan is a huge sign that Aelin does ultimately trust him now. And we know that Elide doesn't tend to trust people easily. So heading in the right direction.
We switched to Lorcan's POV, who couldn't help but notice how beautiful and lovely Elide was, especially her mouth, which looked like a fresh piece of fruit. I don't know why, but I like that description so much. But now I'm like, damn, why has no one ever described my mouth that way? I don't even know what fruit my mouth would be, but I want someone to say that to me.
That is like a very nice mental image. You can picture that so clearly. It's giving like a cherry red or a strawberry red or something too. I don't know.
Like a raspberry?
Yeah, maybe.
Something like that.
Also, while we have been complaining a little about Fae and sending things, etc., in this case, I did like it when it said, like a goddamn dog, he picked up her scent among the crowd and followed her back to this tent. I don't know. I just find it funny that he like wanted to find her and then he's just like following her around. And something about big hulking scary Lorcan deciding that he had to find Elide and he's gonna like trail after her scent is just really funny to me. I don't know.
It's okay when Lorcan does it. I like it when he does it.
And then my last little point from this section, it did stick out to me when it said, in the shadows and glowing lights within, with the headdress and dangly beads and dark red robes, the Oracle incarnate, serene, exquisite, and utterly forbidden. It may be nothing, but I did wonder if this is foreshadowing for some possible Oracle-like abilities, more so in the sense of whatever the blue blood witch is, because they seem to sort of have this ability to predict or sense things that others can't about the future and whatnot. We know Elide's lineage is Blackbeak, but who's to say these other abilities don't cross over between clans, or perhaps it's referring to a gift from Aneth, since Elide already possesses an unusually high skill for being perceptive through observation that typically go unnoticed. This all kind of continues to feed into this debate of like, does Elide actually have some magic? How much does she have, if she has any, and all of that? But I'm just gonna flag it for now and see if that comes up in any way in the future.
Lorcan had been so focused on thoughts of Elide that he hadn't detected the attack until it was too late. And I thought it was funny that he thought the attack Lorcan supposed was Hellas's way of telling him to keep his in his pants and mind out of the gutter.
Hey, you know what you should have substituted that word with?
What?
Parts.
His parts? Ew. I don't like that. Oh, wait. Let me say it again. The attack Lorcan supposed was Hellas's way of telling him to keep his sword in his pants and mind out of the gutter.
Amazing. Chef's kiss.
Lorcan tells Elide to hide while Lorcan goes to confront the Ilken. The Ilken tell Lorcan they seek a girl who killed their kin and had a limp. Lorcan, of course, knows they're talking about quote-unquote Marion. Lorcan continues to insist she isn't there and the Ilken need to go elsewhere.
Ooh, I found it especially terrifying when it said the leathery wings, it seemed, marked them as some slight variation of the ones who had tracked them in Oakwald. A variation or a refining of an already ruthless hunter, because that makes it sound like Erewhon has already iterated on versions of these creatures to help them adapt to fight against the Fae or Aelin or like their magical powers and stuff better. And so that's just scary because they're always fighting a battle against a creature that's constantly adapting.
It's a problem because every time that they kill some of the Ilken, it gets reported back to Erewhon and he hones them to make them more resistant to their attacks.
Right.
And that's going to become a big problem for sure.
Yeah.
The Ilken catch Lorcan off guard when they reveal the girl's name is Elide Lorcan and her uncle is the Lord of Parenth. The realization hits Lorcan that Elide had lied to him all this time, but there was no time for him to dwell on it because the Ilken were mad as hell and they decided they wanted to eat Umbriel, Nick, and Lorcan as a snack.
They're hungry. Sweet treat.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I will say once again, despite the tension of the current events, I did find it funny because he's like, Marion, Elide had lied, had managed to keep him from even sniffing the lie on her, because obviously this is that moment when Lorcan realizes he got. It's just funny.
You have to imagine in his entire lifespan, which I think he's like 500 years old, he's probably never been tricked. Not like that. And so he's like, God's above this little tiny
by his wife,
small boned by his wife.
All right, so that ends chapter 40. Moving on to chapter 41.
Elide squeezed herself into a hidden floor compartment in one of the wagons and waited. She prepared to make a run for it, but she didn't get far because her cloak snagged on something in the crawl space before she could even make it 3 running feet. But that was not the only thing that stopped Elide. She heard a deep male voice, but thank the darkness, it was just Lorcan.
I could totally picture this scene very vividly in my mind. Elide's like, God damn it, she's like tugging at her cloak because she gets stuck. And then Lorcan's just sitting there watching her with his immortal stillness, side-eyeing her like, you would not make it. He's probably picked apart every little thing that she's done and be like, nope, you'd be dead. Try again, you know?
I wonder how long he sat there and just watched her in that tiny little compartment. Just like, any day now, Elide. Go ahead.
Probably longer than she thinks.
Lorcan is clearly angry at Elide for lying because he says, did you know those ilken beasts love to talk with the right encouragement? And they told me some very, very interesting things. But you didn't tell me the truth, did you, Elide?
I gasped with excitement because I was like, oh shit, like, what is she gonna do?
The way my heart stopped, I was like, oh, because how are we gonna get out of that? He knows we got.
Yeah.
But our fearless Elide didn't back down even in the slightest and told Lorcan why should she have trusted him, especially when he had been stalking her for days in the forest and he could have easily sold her out at any point, which, to be fair, I think is very reasonable. I get why Lorcan's mad, but Lorcan is also very strategic. And even though he's mad, I think deep down he gets why she didn't just offer up that information about herself. Because I feel like if she had, in his thoughts, he would have been like, gods above, what a small, idiotic creature to share so much about herself.
Right,
you know?
right.
And so, like, he's mad, but he probably respects it. But I also feel like from Lorcan's perspective, it would have been helpful for Lorcan to know who she was because he would have had a better sense of how important she was to Vermin, Vernon, and Erewhon, and he probably would have been more on alert and better prepared for future attacks.
Those are good points. Honestly, this whole reveal, we knew it was coming at some point, but, you know, from Elide's perspective, Lorcan is helpful to her because he offers protection, while for Lorcan, Elide is helpful because he was using her for information. So it's always just been a mutually beneficial situation, but ultimately it was bound to result in a truth reveal, and that time is now.
Sure is. Lorcan tells Elide, it does make a difference who you are. With your queen on the move, your uncle knows she'd pay a steep price to get you back. You are not a mere breeding asset. You are a negotiation tool. You might very well be what brings that bitch to her knees. To be totally honest, at first, I didn't really understand because even though Elide is a child of Terrasen, Aelin doesn't really know her. Even when they talk about their past, Aelin and Elide were not close. I remember there's this description where Aelin was like, Elide was always like too shy and quiet. They just didn't really have a connection. I think Aelin would care, but I don't think Aelin would be willing to go to trade anything super valuable to get her back. But then, I'm just being honest, it's harsh, but that's war, baby, okay? But I forgot that she's also the rightful heir to parents, which makes her a super important political figure in Terrasen as well, including, I'm pretty sure, a voting member of the council that could decide if Aelin can be queen. So that makes her much, much more valuable as a political figure for Terrasen. Even still, honestly, with that knowledge, I don't know if Aelin would go to rescue her because it would be really risky. She'd have to go to Morath where fucking Erewhon is.
Fair enough. I kind of feel like Aelin would try to rescue Elide should something happen to her that she actually knew about. We do know that Aelin remembers Elide and Lady Marian, and she has at times wondered what happened to her. And given how dedicated Aelin is to oaths and promises, I actually do feel like Elide is important to Aelin because she represents Lady Marian's sacrifice to protect her, especially now that Aelin knows Elide is alive, thanks to Manon in the next chapter. So I feel like Lorcan pointing this out means maybe we do need to flag this and be on the lookout for something happening to Elide outside of what's already happened to her, I guess.
Fair enough. I guess I didn't really think about how Aelin would feel about Elide in terms of Lady Marian's sacrifice, and I feel like that
she's
was
just a political tool to you.
Well, damn straight, okay? From an emotional perspective, that probably would make Aelin feel a lot more obligated because Aelin would literally not be here without Lady Marion. So
exactly.
That's fair. But Lorcan doesn't know that.
True.
He doesn't know that. I'm just a cold-hearted, fire-breathing bitch queen, okay? Elide tells Lorcan off, and I have to say I was pretty impressed because Lorcan is honestly terrifying, but Elide don't give a fuck about that. And also, why was it so hot when she told him off? Like, truly, it was hot.
It's so funny because little Elide is the only one who, first of all, is unfazed by his anger, and second of all, who he actually tolerates talking back to him too. You know, because Lorcan wouldn't take that from anybody else, but it's Elide.
Oh, hell
it's
no.
his wife, okay? And he's like looking at her with a side eye, you know, but
Elide taunts Lorcan and says, "Or what? You'll send me to Morath? Use me as your ticket in?" Lorcan responds with, "I hadn't thought to do that, but thank you for the idea." The conversation quickly takes a dark turn when she tells Lorcan she would kill herself before she allowed him to take her back to Morath. Hearing Elide say that really stalled Lorcan's anger. I think it indicates that he does care for Elide at least a little bit, and ultimately this makes him realize he's not actually angry at Elide. He's angry at himself for being so easily duped by his own arrogance and prejudices when he sees and thinks about Elide.
Yup, I totally agree. Getting got by an 18-year-old human is bound to sting the ego a little bit for him. I also think he was stunned by Elide's honor and lack of care in dying. She was like, nah, I would rather die than go back there. I feel like it's a very unusual response. And given how dangerous Lorcan is relative to Elide, the fact that she was so unfazed by that probably shocked him because it makes it clear that what Elide has experienced was so awful that she'd rather die than risk enduring something like that ever again. And so I think that really hit home for him.
Yeah, because, I mean, like you said, what would you have to go through that you'll literally kill yourself? You're like, no, I will not, under any circumstance. Right. But I mean, given what they do to people in Morath, I don't blame her.
Yeah.
Because it's not even just like, oh, you're in a dungeon, you're treated horribly. They literally infect you with the Valg and they, like, destroy your soul. So yeah, I'm good on that. Lorcan asks about the hidden object he sensed Elide had been carrying with her, but Elide doesn't give away what it is and refuses to show it to Lorcan. Something else that made me think Lorcan is starting to develop feelings and respect for Elide is when he thinks about how he could just wait until she was sleeping and snoop. But ultimately, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He thinks, but there was a line. Somehow there was a goddamn line here. And honestly, I liked that. Honestly, it warmed my little heart.
Oh, I know. That did make me melt a little bit more for Lorcan. Despite his judgment, he does care about Elide and I think can understand what it's like to be alone. They've both been slowly opening up to each other, but that trust is still on a thin line right now. And so I think without consciously being aware of it yet, Lorcan is also responding to Elide's pure-heartedness and honor as well. He thinks about all the awful things that he's done in his past, but perhaps Elide is also reminding him of his morality and that he can be good if he chooses to be. So she's steering him in the right direction.
Elide tells Lorcan her true backstory, and I thought it was really powerful when she said, I have no lands, no money, no army to offer Aelin Galathinius, but I will find her and help her in whatever way I can, if only to keep just one girl, just one, from ever enduring what I did. I have always admired Elide's grit and determination, and this theme of protecting the forgotten girls of the world has really been a driving motivator for Elide's character, and I think we'll continue to see that from her story arc.
I feel like ever since we got that conversation back in Queen of Shadows between Elide and Manon, that has just stuck with me as like a core character trait for Elide. And it's when she told Manon, it is hope for your homeland that guides you, that makes you obey. Even though she never came, even though I'm here now, I can't let go of that. And I think that is why you obey, because you have been hoping every day of your miserable, hideous life that you will get to go home. I really hope that Elide does get to Aelin so that she can finally see that she was never actually forgotten in the end. And maybe that will close the loop on this part of her journey. In many ways, I think Elide has to hold on to hope with this like death grip, because that is how she finally gets to go home and make everything that happened to her feel like it actually had a purpose rather than just being some reasonless punishment from the world, if that makes sense.
Lorcan then shares his real backstory with Elide. And even though we pretty much knew this about Lorcan's power, I did note that he confirms, I can kill faster. I can sense when death is near. I think my magic is death, given to me by Hellas himself.
Another character with confirmed gifts from a god. We're building our little list. I also just felt like this whole conversation and sharing of truths was really impactful for the relationship between Elide and Lorcan at this point. After Lorcan tells her he's never had any friends, even amongst his cadre, Elide astutely points out, then you and I are the same in that regard at least. And Lorcan thinks, no family, no friends. It hadn't seemed quite so pathetic until she said it, until he suddenly saw himself through her eyes. I feel like Lorcan and Elide are two sides of the same coin, but their response to their similar backgrounds has been dramatically different. Elide has not been completely broken by her trauma. Instead, she remains hopeful and seeks out connection and tries to get back to her home, while Lorcan has basically given in to the bitterness of the world and has become pretty apathetic as a defense mechanism, I think, because it's painful to hope and dream about something different for himself. So I think Elide will continue to be a guiding force to show Lorcan that he doesn't have to let himself be so cold. There is good in the world still worth hoping and fighting for.
Oh, I think that's some really good, insightful analysis on Lorcan, especially about using apathy as a defense mechanism. He can tell himself he doesn't care, so he doesn't have to acknowledge the pain of not having those things. I think something else to sort of support that idea is when he thinks about Rowan, he's so angry at Rowan for abandoning him for Aelin. I don't even think it's necessarily jealousy, maybe a little bit because he wants to have someone, but he felt like Rowan was his brother, quote unquote, in this, and that they both lived the same lifestyle of not having meaningful connections with people. And then when Rowan goes, he's like, you left me, and now I'm alone with my thoughts. And absolutely not. I will not be left alone with my thoughts.
Right.
Yeah, he would not have done well in the pandemic. He would have had to take up a hobby.
Elide will set him straight.
She sure will. She's going to fix him. But Daddy, I love him. To close out the chapter, Elide tells Lorcan he should clean up because he looks like a warrior again. And Lorcan tells Elide that Umbriel and Nick definitely know something is up with them, but they're probably too scared to rat them out.
I am going to put up a yellow flag at this. I do genuinely wonder how this will impact the situation with Money Eyes, Umbriel, and Nick moving forward, because although they don't rat them out to the Ilken at this time, mostly I'm just wondering, like, are they going to be scared of Lorcan and Elide and kick them out later? Or will they let them stay as protection for the caravan now that they've been exposed to the Ilken and know there are these really terrifying creatures out there that they also know Lorcan is capable of defeating? So, like, I could kind of see it going either way.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some element of honor, like we owe you a life debt because you saved our lives. Had you not been there, those Ilken would have fucking shredded us.
Yeah.
And whether Elide was there or not was irrelevant, because if it was really true Elide wasn't there, the Ilken still would have killed them. So I'm kind of leaning towards like maybe there's some loyalty there, but we'll see. Elide climbed out of the wagon and limped into the night, and for the 100th time, Lorcan wondered what the hell he was doing. And of course, we know what he's doing. He's staying with Elide because he loves her. Just kidding, sort of. Really, I'm just manifesting it. I'm manifesting it so hard.
Same. I'm on board with this. I think Lorcan likes a challenge, and little Elide Lorcan has proven herself to be quite the anomaly. I also do really wonder how he intends to adjust his plans now that he knows the truth about who Elide is.
Oh, yeah, because he could use her in some way, but I don't think he would actually want to put her in harm's way.
I don't know. I did have a little bit of a thought where I was like, I mean, now that he knows that she could easily be a bargaining tool, I'm like, I know I don't want to think about that, but I'm like, could Lorcan betray Elide and like do that to her? I don't know. So that's one of my not nice thoughts coming out.
You know what? It's reasonable. I feel like it's fair.
All right, so that ends chapter 41. Moving on to chapter 42.
We opened this chapter with a very short POV from Manon, who is not really fully conscious. But one thing is clear, Manon is in really bad shape and in serious pain from the wounds she sustained in her battle with Granny B. I did like how even though Manon literally thinks she's dead, she's still vicious as hell. She thinks she hated death. And death could go to hell too.
It's funny because she's like fighting literally like hell against death itself. She's like, nah, I'm not going today.
Not
Can't
today.
Get today.
Manon comes fully conscious and finds Aelin lounging in a chair in her room. Something I did find really touching is that Manon's first thoughts were of Elide and if she made it to Aelin, and then of Abraxos. And I think this is just more evidence pointing to the fact that Manon continues to evolve more and care about others.
I think it's safe to say that Manon does have a heart now.
Also, I will never miss an opportunity to talk about sweet Abraxos. Aelin tells Manon that baby Abraxos has been a very fussy nursemaid for Manon and has been enjoying lounging in the sun on the deck. And that is just so on brand for Abraxos.
That little detail was so funny to me, especially because Manon is like literally chained to a bed imprisoned by Aelin. And meanwhile, Abraxos is getting the sweet life, sunning himself on the deck up top and eating and like pooping wherever he wants. Honestly, he's probably like, I got you here. You'll be fine. I'm going to go take a nap. I also think there's something to be said about Abraxos somehow knowing that bringing Manon to Aelin would be a safe bet. I know we'll likely never get this answer, but I do really want to know what is different about Abraxos because he's always been different from the other wyverns and just seems to have this like sense for fate. So therefore he knew that he had to get Manon and Aelin together.
Aelin tells Manon that she is now their prisoner and basically if she steps one toe out of line, Aelin will kill her. First, when I read this scene, I was a little put off by how Aelin treats Manon. I know they definitely aren't friends or anything, but I thought it was kind of shitty, especially when Aelin is like, water's next to the bed if you can reach it, which she knows Manon clearly can't. And Manon definitely needs water. Okay, that's like a basic human right. Oh, I guess she's not really human, but you know what I mean. But then I started thinking about their last interaction, which also happened to be the first time they met. And I remembered not only did they fight, but Astron's arrow meant for Aelin seriously injured Rowan. And when you keep that in mind, it makes sense that Aelin is particularly harsh to Manon at this moment because even before Rowan and Aelin sealed the deal, she would have felt this way, but Rowan is her mate, and it's instinctual that she protect him, and this person threatened Rowan and her. When I thought about it like that, I was kind of like, okay, that's fair.
Yeah, I think I had a similar reaction reading about Manon's treatment because I just felt like it was kind of extreme. Clearly something went down with her if she's off flying on her own without her 13, and she also arrives basically dead. To your other point, I think naturally they have always been considered enemies, and it was that one situation at Themis's Temu Temple that they decided to basically call a temporary truce. I couldn't help myself. I had to put that in there. I would imagine at this point, there is still a lot they need to suss out before they know if they can actually trust her. For all they know, Manon is a trap or Manon is now another target, and her being with them puts them all at even greater risk than they already were. And most importantly, where does Manon's allegiance actually stand? We know Manon, but Aelin really does not. And so I guess all things considered, I do think it was compassionate for Aelin to have healed her and fed her and taken care of Abraxos. I didn't agree with everything that she did, but I do appreciate that she did take steps to not just let Manon be chained and dying in the ship, you know what I mean? And last note, I also found it interesting that Aelin tells Manon they found iron splinters in her belly, because that confirms to me that I think the iron was preventing Manon from being able to heal on her own.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that, because I remember when I was first reading the chapters, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And I totally forgot about it in the notes. So thank you for pointing that out. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Aelin leaves the room and Manon quickly gets overwhelmed with thoughts and worries about everything that happened and everything her grandmother told her, and she quickly falls unconscious again.
I am dying to know what happened to the 13. Did they get caught? Are they still looking for Manon? I swear to God, if they have been hurt, I am going to lose my shit.
I know.
I better DNF this book. Just kidding, I'm not.
DNF this motherfucker. I will never read again. Never.
I'm going to
Nothing.
forget how to read.
Just like Elide, I'm going to unlearn it.
Well, Elide never learned.
Yeah. For the 13, I keep holding on to the hope that just Manon by herself, terrifyingly lethal. It would take a lot to bring her down, right? And so I would imagine if 12 of the 13 are together, it would be really hard to take them down and capture them, especially when you think about all of their unique skill set, like Edda and Briar, the shadows. They're probably constantly scouting and on the lookout. And so I feel cautiously optimistic that the 13 are somewhere out there and that they're okay. I mean, they're not thriving, but they're going to be fine.
I hope so. Just as we switch to Dorian's POV, I, of course, am noting all of Dorian's thoughts about Manon's agonizingly beautiful face because y'all can probably already tell I am dying to see what's going on with their situation. However, I am also flagging this thought, and it says, it felt fitting somehow considering that they were likely sailing to their own doom, because that's pretty ominous, and I really feel like getting the lock may be some sort of trap. I said it again. Or obviously something bad is going to go down there since Erewhon and Maeve's forces are there too, so...
Well, moving on, as they approach Punjali, Dorian can't help but think about Princess Nehemia. One thing that really stood out to me is when Dorian thinks Dorian had tried and failed not to contemplate if that touch she'd once given him, the word mark she'd sketched over his chest, had somehow awakened that power of his. If it had been a curse as much as a blessing. And I remember this moment so very distinctly from way back in Calm. And I know Lorraine had speculated that Nehemia had drawn some kind of word mark on his chest. And at the time, we thought it might be protective, but more likely it had awakened his power. Especially because the description is like something slumbering inside of him was awoken, or there's some description like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, this kind of seems like actual text confirmation that we were correct, that Nehemia did do something to ignite Dorian's power.
I was very, very excited to learn about that. I also, of course, want to know what the word mark was. And I guess, assuming that this is true, how something could activate the magic in him despite him having it the whole time. It also makes you wonder about how what Nehemia did factors in with how the King of Aderlin, you remember he was talking about how, because of his bloodline and Dorian sharing his bloodline, it must have made Dorian an outlier, and that's why he could still use his magic or whatever, despite the spell that the king had cast with the clock towers and everything. But then thinking about the Nehemia thing, which would have happened before that point too. So then I'm okay, well, what's going on? How do the word marks connect into all of that versus the spell that the King of Aderlin did? And I would like to know. Add it to the list.
Manon finally awakes and Dorian blesses us with Lorraine's favorite line, "Hello, witchling." And Manon responded with, "Hello, princeling."
I just love it so much.
But I know you do.
Damn, Dorian's being all sly and cheeky because Manon asks him, "Am I your prisoner too?" And he responds, "My life debt is paid. You're nothing to me at all." And I was like, psh. Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing
Okay.
to me. No, absolutely not.
Manon asks Dorian what happened, and so he tells her. Somehow, Abraxos flew straight for them, and when they were close to the ship, Manon fell off Abraxos into the water. They retrieved Manon, and Rowan and Aelin had been slowly and intermittently healing her over the past week. Conveniently, Dorian didn't mention he was someone who immediately jumped in the water after her, as if it had just been an instinct.
Yeah, that part stuck out to me too, but I think it continues to show Dorian's quiet leadership and kind of just his honor. He saved Manon because I think he just knew it was the right thing to do, just as she'd saved him without thinking about any of the consequences, right? She did it instinctively. And I don't think he wants to emotionally complicate the moment by stating, "Hey, I saved you from drowning," because that would then require him to, have to explain why he did it. And to be honest, I don't think he really knows why he did it yet, So for now, just the act of having saved her life speaks for itself. if that makes sense.
Manon asks Dorian if a woman named Elide is in their company and for news of the 13, but Dorian sadly has no news of either. Manon also warns Dorian to tell Aelin it is a waste of time for her to try and use Manon for negotiations because Grady will not acknowledge her as heir or witch, and instead that will only likely bring an attack down on them.
I would also like to point out that when Dorian tries to ask about Rifthold, Manon responds, everything has a price. And that stuck out to me because obviously it was Baba Yellowlegs, a witch, who had said, nameless is my price. And that does make me wonder how the witches factor into the greater plans with Aelin, the wyrkeys, the wyrd-ky, and maybe even the gods. Even contextually speaking, Manon has gone from being the literal heir to the Blackbeak clan to realizing that who she thought she was has been a lie. And now she's trying to piece together who she really is because she can't be an Iron Teeth witch, but she also has no relationship with the Krakens. So in a sense, Manon is kind of like nameless as well because she's no longer part of an established legacy and all of her titles have been stripped away from her. And so maybe it's more like kind of symbolic than anything, and it may not even be directly connected to the nameless is my price thing, but the phrasing of calling and recognizing that things have a price, it struck a chord, I guess.
That's totally fair. I mean, I feel like if I even read the word price, even if it's like, what is the price of this new shirt for Lorcan? I'm going to be like, nameless is my price. Dorian tries to glean what happened after she rescued him in Rifthold, but Manon gets cagey with the details and tries to distract Dorian by asking for food. And Dorian tries to get flirty with Manon when he says, it's coming in a few minutes. I'd hate for you to waste away into nothing. It'd be a shame to lose the most beautiful woman in the world so soon into her immortal wicked life. Manon responds by telling Dorian that she is not a woman. And with this line, the winner of Addison's game, who gave her the ick, Dorian says, which woman, as long as the parts that are there, what difference does it make? And literally, what the actual fuck? What a bizarre and gross thing to say. And at such a weird time. And to be honest, I found this whole interaction a little cringy, but this part specifically had me recoiling, okay? Like, I don't know. I hated it. Like, I was like, ooh. I was like, maybe I wasn't really focusing. So, like, I re-listened to this part a couple of times, and I was just like, but why? Ooh, I don't know. I hated it.
I actually wasn't that bothered by it. Call me a weirdo, I guess, but I kind of loved it. Clearly, there is some, like, flirtatious tension, and Manon's trying to be like, boo, I'm a witch, be scared of me, right? But Dorian is like, I don't give a fuck, you're still a woman to me. And so, in a way, it's kind of nice because the message is, you are beautiful however you are. You know what I mean?
No, that is not how I took it at all.
That is how I took it. He doesn't care what she looks like. He's like, he still thinks of her as this attractive being to him. So that's how I read it.
That's a nice thought. But he literally says, as long as the parts that matter are there. He's talking about her.
Yeah, obviously, I know that. But he's also like flirting with her. There's a vibe there. They're both trying to like distract each other from whatever the heck is going on around them. And that's like how I'm interpreting all of this. And so.
Yeah, but it went from kind of like spicy to kind of skeevy. I don't know. I don't like it.
I will say I agree that the wording could have been a little bit smoother,
okay.
But it's the underlying message that I latched on to.
Yeah, I didn't take any deep underlying message. I thought he was just being skeevy. Totally honest.
No.
Okay, text us and tell us who's right, me or Lorraine. Pick me.
I don't care.
Choose
I still liked
me.
it anyway. So.
Love me.
But actually, okay, this is completely not related, but this did remind me of something. So I actually have been a little bit curious about reading some monster smut. Okay, now hold up.
What?
Before... I know it's a subgenre of romance and fantasy, I think. I have yet to read anything within that genre, so if anyone has any good recs, please let me know. But for whatever reason, the whole idea of Manon being considered like not a woman because she's like part Valg and is a different type of being, it just sort of triggered the thought process of monster smut, and that's where my brain went. Like, for example, have you heard of Kiss of the Basilisk? I'm pretty sure that is supposed to be a monster smut, technically, I think.
All I can hear in my head right now is, I've been a nasty girl. It's somebody gonna match my freak.
Yeah.
That's all I can
match
hear.
my freak, guys. Match my freak.
Oh my God. Okay. Dorian did slightly redeem himself with his next line. He tells Manon, believe it or not, this ship has an unnatural number of attractive men and women on board. You'll fit right in. And fit in with the cranky immortals, I suppose. And this had me laughing because it's so true. That ship literally has so many hot people. Oh, Lord, if I could go into a fictional world, take me to that ship because hot people everywhere.
Dude, you know what I would like to see? I would love to see the whole cadre, the whole group of people on the ship, put them on Love Island. Someone needs to start like a fantasy bachelor or like a bachelorette series with all of these beautiful immortal beings.
Hell yeah.
Someone should make that. Like make a parody of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, but it's a cosplay with all of our favorite immortal characters. You know what I mean?
Ooh, yeah, that'd be very entertaining.
Just a thought.
Dorian tries to make conversation with Manon and asks if her grandmother was the one who hurt her, and then he apologized if saving him is what caused this. Manon tells Dorian a very abbreviated version of the events that led her there and pleads with Dorian to find news of her 13 and also to tell Aelin that Elide and Lorcan was alive and looking for her. This was honestly so sad to read because Manon has truly lost everything that was important to her and her entire world has been upended. And it was extra heartbreaking when she told Dorian that 13 was all that she had left. And now she doesn't even know if they're okay.
I really just hope that they're all like hanging out in the Oakwald, like undercover or something. So I also found the whole scene with Dorian asking Manon about the 13 and what happened to her really poignant because Dorian is really an empathetic character who considers the impact he has on those around him. And I also think that in the same way that the cadre is seeing a different style of leadership in Aelin, I think Manon will start to see this as well. Manon is reworking what leadership and building an army or force requires. And in the past, she comes from a background of pure obedience and loyalty at the expense of mercy and compassion, having grown up amongst the Iron Teeth Witches. But now she has a chance to see that leadership does not have to be that. In fact, Aelin is doing the complete opposite in many ways. But more importantly, she sees that Dorian is deferring authority to Aelin in addition to still being friends with her because he believes in what they are all doing together. And I think this will continue to be really pivotal as Manon starts to rebuild her identity and decides what she will do next. Just before he leaves, Dorian tells her, then I suppose you and I are both heirs without crowns. And that line really hit me because Dorian and Manon have mirrored experiences. They have both lost their kingdoms, they've betrayed their legacies, and they've been forced to confront new identities and paths. But just as Dorian is beginning to see that perhaps it's kind of a blessing for him to be without a crown right now, I think Manon may go through that experience as well because ultimately it gives them opportunities to choose their loyalties and find belonging and humanity for themselves.
Also, I think it's worth noting, too, that Dorian, Manon, and Aelin are all kings and queens without crowns because Aelin technically doesn't have control of her space either. That's kind of incredible when you think about 3 rightful heirs who have no money, no title, no lands. They have nothing.
But they're all coming together to fight Erewhon.
Yeah. And to win The Bachelor.
Exactly.
We switch back to Manon's POV, where she pretty much sinks into a depressive state. Her thoughts wander from the 13 to nightmares about her grandmother. Something that really stood out to me is when Manon thinks, sometimes she stood beside her grandmother, a witch fully grown, and not the witchling she'd been at the time, and helped the matron carve up a handsome bearded man who begged for her life, his offspring's life. This absolutely has to be a memory of when the matron killed Manon's father, who was a Kraken prince. If this truly is a memory, which it really seems like it is, this is just beyond fucked up. That means that Granny B made Manon help kill her own father and half-sister. And now when I tell you that I hate Granny B, I mean it with every fiber of my being, and I cannot wait until Manon gets revenge. I'm seething with rage at this.
Dude, yeah, that would be literally so tragic. I almost don't even want to know because the cruelty of it is just so awful to think about. But that's a really good thought, and I am on board with that. I don't know what else it would be. Regardless, this definitely calls for an obligatory fuck Granny B. And I am really curious if/when Manon will find the Krakens again. Like, what will that process look like, and how will they respond to her after everything she's done as an Iron Teeth witch, you know?
Yeah, because they're not going to be happy with her. I mean, how can they be? I think, like, eventually they will forgive her, but that's a tough pill to swallow, especially because the father was a
She killed her
prince.
sister.
Yeah, and they're royalty, too. It wasn't just their kin,
Right.
but, like, actual royalty. So, yeah, that whole situation's fucked up. In her hazy state, she thought she was dreaming of a great cat or a white wolf or a golden mountain lion, but really she was just remembering seeing Lysandra, Fenris, and Gavriel taking turns guarding her in their animal forms. Sadly, Manon wished they would just kill her, but of course they never did. So Manon just continued to sleep and to dream.
Oh,
I know. And that's it. That's where the chapter ends.
what an ending.
I know. It's sad, depressing.
Now that we are done with the analysis portion, we of course just have our favorite moments to go over.
First, in the sea with Rowan and Aelin, I loved when Rowan said, "But you and I will learn to manage your power together. You do not face this alone, and you do not decide that you are unlovable because you have powers that can save and destroy." I just feel like Rowan sees Aelin. He sees her.
The ultimate hype man. My first favorite one was also from Rowan, and it's just the classic simple, "There's my fire heart."
It is so romantic. I also loved when Rowan was trying to cheer Aelin up. He tells her, "But who else would be able to get under Errowwan's skin? Never underestimate the power of that insufferable swagger."
My next favorite one, it said, Rowan didn't know whether to be amused, thrilled, or slightly terrified that he'd been blessed with a queen and lover who has so little care for public decency.
That was pretty funny.
I'm sure he loved that a lot since he was on the receiving end of it all.
You guys can tell that I was really obsessed with Aelin and Rowan's chapter because I think I have two more from that chapter. And this is a shared one between Lorraine and I. We both loved when Rowan said, "Even when this world is a forgotten whisper of dust between the stars, I will love you."
Put that on my Valentine card.
Okay, for real though. For real. Like, why is my husband not saying that to me every day? Wow.
Get rid of him. Trade him out for Lorcan.
Okay,
or
deal.
Rowan.
Deal. I love my husband. He's the best. I'm going to send that to him. I'm going to send that and be like, "Wow, isn't this so romantic? Wink, wink."
Okay, so my next favorite one was from Lorcan and Elide's chapters. And it's when Elide asks Lorcan, "Did you sell your shirt too?" And he responds with a feral grin, "Got 10 coppers from a farmer's wife for it."
My last one from Aelin and Rowan's chapter is, "There were no words in his eyes, none in hers either. Words did not do it justice, not in any language, in any world."
Oh,
I know.
My next favorite one was still from Lorcan and Elide's chapters. And it's when it said, Lorcan blinked. She didn't back down an inch. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to him like that.
Hot.
Yep.
This next one is a shared one between Lorraine and I, and it is not from Rowan and Aelin's chapter. It is from Elide and Lorcan's. It's when Elide says, "I have no lands, no money, no army to offer Aelin Galathinius, but I will find her and help her in whatever way I can, if only to keep just one girl, just one, from ever enduring what I did." She's so great.
My next favorite one was with Dorian and Manon, and it's when he asks, "Are you hungry?" wondering what exactly she might eat. Indeed, those gold eyes a slash to his throat. And then Dorian says, "Really?" He lifted a brow. Her nostrils flared slightly, only for sport.
Okay, that's pretty funny, I'll admit. My last one is a funny one, so at least for me, you'll end on a happy note. I liked when Dorian tells Manon, "Believe it or not, this ship has an unnatural number of attractive men and women on board. You'll fit right in, and fit in with the cranky immortals, I suppose."
Immortal Love Island. Immortal Love Island. All right, so to close out our favorite moments tonight, my last one was from the very end with Manon's POV. And it's just that one part of her final thoughts where it said, sometimes she flew over a lush green land, the song of a western wind singing her home.
Oh, I want them to make it to the waste.
One day they will return. They're going to break the curse. Just have to.
And Manon we trust.
All right, so that officially concludes our episode. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked Up Fantasy Podcast. As always, we're so glad you found us, so please leave us a review and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. Well, that's all we've got for you guys today.
So live a little.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye!
Bye! And stay tuned for some bloopers. I spent the next 3 days navigating out of the archipelago.
Yep. I know that because every time I had to say it in the last episode, I was like, I kept wanting to be like archipelago.
Archipelago.
I've done that before and I learned my lesson.
Archipelago.
Not this time.
Whoopsie. Not this time. I hate it. Yuck. I'll never be an overachiever again. It's awful. Oops. Did I get lipstick on my teeth? Okay.
I like red lipstick on you. It looks really nice.
Thanks. For my birthday, like 2 years ago, there's a place where you can go custom make shades. Because I wanted a red, but I was like, I'm too pale. But like, Taylor Swift is pale as hell, and she can pull off red. I'm like, I'm wearing the wrong shade of red.
I have not found a red that I like. Get Lorcan.
Get Lorcan.
Get Lorcan to crawl into your tent with you.
Hell yeah. One tent, one bedroll. Oh no. My new favorite trope. We can get like Manon, like Blackbeak red.
Kraken red.
Kraken red. Oh, wait, that's so good.
Wait, this is our side business. Okay, we're gonna start listing commands and
Throne of Glass make. My God, Kraken red. And then our mascara can be Valg Blood Black. Ooh. Oh my God, I love that. Yikes. I love this. Okay. No one steal our business idea. Any fool who seeks to harm you, usurp you. I can't say it now.
Usurp.
It is usurp. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Aneth. Okay. Usurp.
Archipelago.
Okay. Archipelago. We should name Archipelago blue eyeshadow. Hair tart green. Yes. Yeah, eyeshadow palette.
We should make a fire heart palette.
Stop.
We can make them based off the characters, you know?
I love that idea. Cool. We were talking about Erebon. Oh my God.
Erebon. Archipelago.
Okay. I'm fucked. That episode got me fucked up. Aelin, Lysandra, Rowan,
Lorien.
This shit got me fucked up. Okay. I'll make a little reel with my Dane Defender hat and my kale because I want to trigger the internet. I want to trigger everybody.
You got fighting hands today and for the season.
For the rest of my life. Catch these hands, okay? Why were goofy as fuck? Did you have a sweet treat before recording?
No.
I should have.
Oh, I think that was me and I forgot to turn it back too.
Okay, because I was like, that ain't my
handwriting.
What? I'm like, that ain't my handwriting. No, seriously, I was like, I do not write like that. I just want to fix it. You can see all the junk in my room. Okay. Listen, I'm trying to actually, like, all these, like, random tubs of memorabilia. I was like, I'm just going to leave it in a stack. I'm trying to go through it, so it looks crazy. Okay.
Look at my junk.
Oh, my God. Okay. Oh, my